We are back with episode 12 of season 4 of We Do a Little Pod. Unfortunately, due to some unlucky hard drive failures and then data recovery failures, the video for this episode was lost. Luckily, the audio wasn't lost, and we upgraded our equipment so that this will not happen again. We did a little learning. Before we jump into this week's episode, I want to highlight some big news we announced at the start of this season. Season 4 is officially powered by Arbitrum, and our content is now redistributed across Rug Radio and Decrypt's platforms. Andy and I have been massive fans of Arbitrum since they launched, and both of us invested in Off-Chain Labs' Series B back in 2021. This is a full circle moment for us, and we couldn't be happier to partner with Arbitrum for this season. If you've never felt the frictionless transactions at lightning speeds on the world's most decentralized L2, what are you waiting for? Head on over to portal.arbitrum.io to check out their growing ecosystem where you can explore 600 plus apps and even participate in missions to earn points. Without further ado, let's dive into this week's episode. In this week's episode, we sit down with our good friend and founder of the 24 Hours of Art, Roger Dickerman. We dive into Roger's background in trading and fitness, his love of art, founding Artifex and the 24 Hours of Art, the power of routines, and so much more. As always, this podcast is for entertainment purposes only and should not be relied upon for investment decisions. Andy, D's, and guests may be invested in companies or tokens talked about on this podcast.
This is Andy.
Yeah, I'm D's.
We are here with the first episode of We Do a Little Season 4. We are here Monday morning, January
15th.
Yep, January 15th with Roger Dickerman. Roger is founder of multiple things, founder of Artifex, founder of 24 Hours of Art, founder of the Future of Art podcast, NFT Origin Stories, worked with Aku, every other thing that you've done. I feel like you've done a lot over the last 3 years, but Roger, I think most recently is known for the 24 Hours of Art, which is, in my opinion, the most valuable aggregated NFT art news in the space. Basically, every day, every fucking day, you're up at like 4 a.m. and you're preparing an email or a tweet that says, this is everything that's happened in the art space in the last 24 hours. And then now you have a art piece that goes alongside with the news that is generated, created by whatever art is sold that day or whatever the topic is. And you have, I believe, 50 left at the time of this recording or so out of the 366. But it's been fun to watch them slow trickle. But Roger, thank you for coming and hanging out with us today. How are you doing?
Thank you for having me. I appreciate this. I feel like conversations on air or off air with you are always thoughtful, comfortable, and yeah, they always go interesting places. So
yeah,
it's
and
a no-brainer.
We're fortunate enough to sit down about almost a year and a half ago now in Miami, but it was a shorter pod. You had somewhere to run. We had another guest. It was like, okay, like now we can actually sit down, get to talk a bit about you, get to talk about the fitness background, what you were doing before the space, talk about family and all that fun stuff. But first thing I want to go with is, what made you focus so much on the 24 Hours of Art recently? Because the bear market's been brutal. A lot of attention has shifted, and you've been consistently putting this out for months now. And what made you decide, like, this is what I'm going to pivot to, when you could do a lot of different things? Like, this space is, very wide ranging. You can work in a lot of different parts of it. What made you decide, like, I'm going to double down and focus on telling the story of the art that's going on in the sales?
It happened in stages. I think there's that cliche, some amazing things are built in the bear, whatever the cliche is about building in the bear. And it was the depths of the bear. It was the bleakest time. I mean, assuming now that we're seeing green shoots that lead to something better,
Yes,
that was the bleakest time. For framing, we're talking about mid 2023 in the art market. There was not much going on, but I had a couple thoughts. Number one, I'd been spending a lot of my time behind the scenes, and I realized only after the fact that was a bit of a risk, where I really looked around and I said, wow, I got into the space so organically, so passionate, hair on fire. A lot of my early days were spent just talking my passion. And that was how I found my home. And over time, I'm very comfortable building. And so I just let myself drift. And I looked around, I said, this is the bear, and I'm looking at some of the voices around and I'm like, that's great. We need more of the good stuff. Let me not do that anymore. And let me find a way to step back in front of the scenes. And of course, art is that's my thing, it's my thing. I figured that out over the course of the past few years. I know that's where I want to build. That's where Artifex was founded. That's where my collection, a lot of my relationships were founded. And so that's very clearly my North Star. Now, how am I going to flex the voice? So first, it was the future of art, natural evolution of NFT origin stories, long form organic conversations, much, for the reason I love being here, right? Talk for a while with the people moving the art space forward. And then that began. A little more time went by and I said, actually, a little more time went by and I saw Mando put his first post out.
The Mando's Minutes.
Mando Minutes.
Yes.
Yep.
Those are good.
Things, and this is even before the Mando Minutes. This is the very first post. It was things I'm looking at, right? And I read it, and I get to the end, and there's this little section at the end that's like NFT and low cap or something like that. And it was like maybe one line in there about art. And I read it, and I said, okay, number one, I'm a fan of Mando. Number two, this is very useful. I enjoyed this TLDR. Number three, I want the art. I want this version of the art. And I said, basically, I've been doing this for 3 years myself, rain or shine, on vacation or not. Let me just do it. I was in that mindset of action. And so let me take my process and let me put it out there and see if anyone cares. And I put it out, and the first post got a bunch of traction, and then the next, and then the next. And since then, it's become this iteration where I'm fond of the phrase inspiration ecosystem. Would I have done it if it was just for me? The answer is yes, initially. But would I have continued it if it was just for me? I probably would have taken it back behind the scenes. But it was met with a response that emboldened me. And then we just sort of leveled each other up. The inspiration came back. I set a higher standard. The inspiration came back, set a higher standard, and then ultimately decided, obviously, to release the 366 and the community. And now it's become like this historical tracking mission.
And I like that you're doing the art with it, because you can go back and be like, oh, on this day, like, here are, most recently, like the squiggle piece catches my attention, but just you can quickly see like, oh, what happened that day by the art. It's like, oh, there was X copy sale, there was a ringer, a Fidenza, whatever. It kind of all shows in there. What does an average day in the life look at? Because I feel like you're waking up at 4 a.m., jumping in a cold plunge, like getting a workout in, hitting the sauna, and then like you have the most productive 4 hours or whatever possible. Like, what does a day in the life look like for you right now?
I wish, truthfully, I have the fitness background and the wellness background, and I care a lot about it. I wish I was focused a little bit more on that.
Yeah.
As you can imagine, you know this, launching something, the balance skews. And so instead of doing the cold plunge when I'm waking up, it's really just right to...
I get that.
The monitor plunge.
It's the monitor plunge at 4 a.m.
You really have to like make a concerted effort at that point, where it's like, I went to the gym this morning, but it was like a lot of work to get myself to the gym this morning. Versus like,
you're both very early risers.
Yeah, I'm not quite 4 a.m. I was like 5:30 today, but not 4 a.m.
That's still pretty good.
For me, any day I'm up before 8 is like, holy shit. Like, am I alive? Like, I have this really weird schedule. But to get this out, like, by the time I wake up, that email is basically in my inbox. By the time I wake up, shower, and sit down on my computer, that email is there. So, like, what does that look like? Do you have it done the night before and ready to go, and then you polish it off in the morning? Are you waking up in the morning and just seeing like a whole bunch of data, or like, all the visuals of the last 24 hours and then writing it? Like, I'm definitely curious how that process goes. Have you been able to automate any of it?
Not yet.
No.
Little bits, like little efficiencies, but I'm looking ahead. Obviously, eventually there'll be a time and place for more efficiencies, but I thought it was important in the early stages to take the steering wheel myself and just make sure that the standard I want is hit. And then now I'm sort of earmarking these things. Okay, that can be made an efficiency. That can be made an efficiency. The goal really is just that balances out a bull. Like, if a bull does express itself here, our world is going to get a lot crazier. So all I care about is that my efficiencies counterbalance the bull. And if that happens, I can sustain this, indefinitely, right? As long as it takes, as long as we all find value in this, which I hope is many years. But I'll give you the whole process. So the day goes on with bit of an email draft, like a notepad, and I'll just throw things in it, right? Just traffic the space, traffic socials, relationships, groups, whatnot. Anything I see in it that I know is earmarkable, especially stuff that happens, let's say over the counter, or I know is not going to exist off an aggregator. That stuff I'll have to throw in that draft and just have that ready. Wake up at 4 o'clock, my coffee ritual begins. Fresh ground beans, boom, sit down with that first cup. Usually I'm sitting down at 4:20 a.m. for the culture.
Are we doing pour over, French press? What's the...
You nailed it. First guess. Pour over,
Love a good pour
ceramic pour over, 1 cup. Take great care in the beans that are selected. Right now I'm rotating through a couple Stumptowns. Always fresh, always on point.
Are you a light, medium, or dark roast guy?
I'm a medium roast. Okay. I've gone all over the spectrum, but right now I'm settled nicely in the medium roast range.
That's having the morning ritual where you can just like, I'm going to do 10, 15 minutes, whatever, and then sit down. It's perfect. I stopped doing the coffee every day because I started getting headaches when I wouldn't drink coffee.
It's a
and
thing.
Now I'm going to drink coffee every day for a week, and then I'm going to go home and get headaches. It's the only reason I don't drink this every day is because the day I don't, I wake up with a migraine.
I've never had a caffeine headache in my life, and I consume ridiculous amounts
That's
of caffeine.
insane. Do you get any withdrawals if you don't drink coffee? Like you'll wake up, it's like brain fog. It's like this dull pulsing thud in the back of your head, and you're like, fuck. Like,
I used to, speaking of the fitness and wellness routines falling off a bit, over the course of that decade-long career, once a year at least, if not twice a year, I would deliberately go off coffee. And for me, it was always a 48-hour stretch. You'd have to get over the first 48 hours.
that's the hardest part.
You'd have that dull pain. And then about a week would go by and you'd say, hey, life is pretty good without coffee too. And then inevitably, because I do like the taste of it and I like the ritual, inevitably I'd slide back in.
Are you completely black after the pour over? Do you put any?
I'm
milk?
just black coffee.
I think the coffee tastes worse when you put milk in it and stuff.
Yeah.
I only do the latte with milk, but no milk in the actual coffee. So going back to the art a little bit, you had said the love of art has been more of a recent, like in the last 3 to 5 years type thing. What drew you to appreciating art, assuming that you didn't appreciate it as much in the previous fitness world and what you were doing before? Like, what made you realize, oh, this is my North Star of all the things here?
It connected all the dots. That's my phrase that I use. But speaking specifically about the art, it connected me back to my childhood. I loved art. Loved it. Created it all the time. I grew up in a lot of academic rigor, but I wasn't also allowed out with my friends a lot. I was out like once a week, right? The rest of the time was spent in academics in the house. And when I wasn't doing that, I was drawing, sketching, right?
Okay.
Figuring that out, just following the love of that. And that inevitably in adolescence led me into the comic books and characters and just exploring all that. And I remember coming out of college, and I remember starting as, I was in a global market making firm starting as a trader. And I remember as I was beginning for the first time having actual money, right? I said, I should buy an art piece. And I started looking around to think through what would I actually buy here. I was asking other people what they thought was like a good combination, aesthetic and an investment, something that, I would be proud to have, but also maybe would retain its value over time. And then I just got away from it. And then work picked up and the hours bleed by and, sands of time move on. You get in the fitness and wellness business, and I started to appreciate art loosely stated from a different angle. I started doing a lot of designing. I was always steeped in our businesses, whether it was logo packs and working outright with creatives to design certain things for the business. From day one, we were sort of producing these fun videos that would incorporate different artistic elements. We had a muralist, wonderful graffiti artist based here in New York, Jenna Morello. She did this insane mural at the front of our business, coating the entire wall. So subconsciously, in the back of my mind, I was always around art. Now, obviously, you find NFTs and then hone in on art, and now it just explodes.
Got you. So going back to even before the fitness, did you say you were a trader?
Yeah.
How did you get into that? Like, you went to school. What did you major in?
So I was business and finance, basically. Okay. Came out. So I went to school at Drexel, did a 5-year program with 3 co-ops. The last co-op I found, the co-op was like 6 months out of the year. You'd get a job 6 months.
Drexel's like a big co-op school, right? Like
it is.
I worked with a bunch of Drexel kids back in my first job out of school because I was in the Philly area as well. And like all of them were like, oh yeah, I did a co-op here and that was how I found it. And I was like, that was not something that Villanova did.
Do you know what was great in now long-term hindsight about the co-op program is that I figured out what I didn't want to do.
Yeah.
Because my initial major was information technology, information systems.
That's me.
There we go. and my first co-op was like Office Space, the movie, for those who are familiar.
Yeah.
It was that. That was
my life for 4 years.
Yeah. And so I lived that between co-ops and I kept up part-time outside of that. That was my life for 2 years, solidly in college.
And you were like, no.
And coming out of the back of that, I actually made a promise to myself. And I think this is when I cut the cord between myself and this formal academic system that I had followed rigorously and demandingly for all those years. Because it was always, for me, it was sort of the mandate that I was given at home was, you have to finish first year in class, you have to keep up a 4.0 GPA, you have to, go
very strict,
get the full scholarship,
parents.
keep going step by step. And then that was when I cut the cord, where I looked at those 2 years in Office Space and I said, this can't be the thing. And so went into the last co-op, my third and final, and I said, I'm going to only interview for jobs and positions outside of my major. And even if it's against the rules, I'm just going to do it. And I'm going to show up to these interviews and I'm going to rock them and I'm going to figure out where I want to be. And I ended up landing a great position in business consulting. But I had this one last interview and they sort of offered me the position, which I declared and was truthful. It was my first choice. And they're like, here you go, you're in. Great, good job. And I'm like, well, I have this one other interview, and sort of true to my initial promise, weirdly, like this naive, youthful promise to yourself. I got to see this path through. And I end up in what was the trading firm that I would work for. And I toured through and I vibed with the guys who were on the desk. And there was I was a huge poker player. There was a poker room. And it sort of captured the fancy. It was very much the opposite of cubicle life. It was this open forum, highly inspired. You could feel the energy. And I said, that's where I have to be. And so I pivoted last second. That ended up being my final co-op. It then became my professional career off the jump. So
how long were you trading for? Like, how long did you work there before getting into the fitness world?
3 years total.
Okay.
3 years total. And then again, I made my next naive, youthful snap decision. And it was the era of when Tim Ferriss was coming up.
Okay.
It was
like late 2000s, early 2010s?
Let's root ourselves here. This would have been 2006-07.
Okay.
Yeah, 2006-07. So Tim Ferriss has just created the 4-Hour Work Week. Book launches, and his blog is now ascending in popularity. So I consume the book at the same time as I read The Count of Monte Cristo. It's like my nonfiction, fiction, weird combo. My brain goes on fire. I hatched all these various entrepreneurial ideas. And I just said, hey, I have to now take my next leap and cut a different cord. And now I'm going out on my own.
And were you already into fitness a good amount before? Or were you...
Side passion.
Okay.
Side passion. So more so like just personally you liked working out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I guess the backstory to the fitness piece is all the academic rigor growing up. I was a little pudgy growing up, I was never like wholly in my body.
Yeah.
And then I got into college and I started learning, I can tweak the food here. I can work out like this. And I started to understand, interesting. I have options here. Right. And that's the backstory to it. And then some friends started asking me for advice and start to program for them. And then that's the side path that eventually leads.
So you had the personal success, helped out some friends, and it was like, maybe I could be helping out more people here. What eventually, was trading stressful? Was it too volatile? Was it something that you knew after a year or two that I'm probably not going to be doing this very long term? Or was it much more like a year 3 hits, you have this epiphany of fuck, I'm cutting the cord. I need to immerse myself into something completely different again.
It was more about the epiphany.
Okay.
It was high stress. Don't get me wrong. It was high stress, but manageable. I mean, what we do now has its own stressors, right? You would say.
A little bit.
But
yeah, something like that.
But it was mainly the epiphany. And I remember at the time I had an amazing boss. And I had amazing mentors on the desk. And I had this path. It was like you take a step back, you go bird's eye view, and you see where you're walking. And it's a cool place, don't get me wrong. And I felt bad about leaving because, I enjoyed my boss. He gave me a huge opportunity and then sort of brought me along. And I felt bad about leaving. And he even came, years later when we started the fitness facility, he came by with like a personalized fitness rug with our logo on it. And we spent a little bit of time. And it was just nice to hit that full circle moment. But at the time, the thing I felt worse about was just telling him. But I knew that's where I needed to go.
Deep down.
And so as far as the fitness side of things go, that's where I have way more I can add to the conversation there than the trading side. What was your kind of like first jump in? Like, so you said you were doing like programming for friends and stuff. So did it start out just like basically as a trainer or coach, that kind of thing? Or did you go straight to like, I'm going to start a more traditional business around this?
So the winding road continues. It doesn't happen immediately at all. And in fact, the first sort of products I'm looking to create as an entrepreneur have nothing to do with fitness yet. And then we can kind of skip over those. There's like software, fantasy football, all sorts of random things. And then I realize, this has been my passion. It's growing. Let me express it with tech software. So I'm not even thinking I'm going to own a fitness facility. That is the furthest thing from my mind. I am thinking I am going to design and develop, and I have a good friend at the time who I was working with. I'm going to design and develop useful fitness software and work virtually. That was my thought. And as part of that process, there was a local gym, and I started to become interested in the personal training market, as it were, ended up being a target. And I said, this is a great market for the software product that I'm building. Let me go to the local gym and start informally surveying some personal trainers. And so I end up going to this local gym, and I start talking to a trainer and ask him questions. And he's like, you should talk to the manager here. I'm like, oh, great, let's talk to the manager here. And the manager is like, now a close personal friend. He's like, you should come in and be a trainer. And this loose framework of mind that I have at the time, I'm like, this is actually perfect. I'll get a free gym membership. I'll live in the consumer group that I want to target, and I'll do the thing. And then everything goes wonky from there. And I meet my now wife, and she was a former gymnast, and we pair up sort of what we're both passionate about. I start, gaining a client book. And then brick and mortar becomes the anomaly of my life for 10 years.
So you met your wife in the gym.
Mm-hmm.
And how long have you been together with her?
Now it's been almost 15 years.
It's impressive. I feel like the relationships are one of my favorite things to talk about. Like when you find your wife, probably didn't expect it when you joined the gym of like, I'm going to find my wife. But it's like, boom, you find your wife. Has she been into the shift to the art as much as you are, or is she more, or I guess the question I have is what does she do? Does she like do anything in the art space as well? Is she in the fitness space? Is she
fitness and real estate, are her focal points? She's been great. She's been really supportive in the sense that she's not disinterested. She'll look at an art piece and say, that's great, or the opposite. She'll look at something that I'm doing and say, that's great, or the opposite.
She's very honest.
It's important to have someone in your life who can say, hey, this is kind of shit.
Not great.
This is not good.
She is extremely honest, fiery Italian woman, like Italian family. Yes. She's amazing. And I love it. It's a great counterbalance because a lot of times I'll adopt the calmer, more measured, almost robotic sometimes energy just to meet the task at hand. Yeah. And then she'll come in and just be like, yeah, that sucks. Change it. I'm like, okay. All right. Good perspective.
I feel like I haven't got the pleasure of meeting Mrs. Dickerman yet. Feel due. I feel like most of our friends, you have kids.
One
kid.
Yep.
And normally you go to an event, it's like, well, wife stays home, make sure kid, everybody's good to go. So I haven't had the pleasure of meeting her yet. I'm curious when that happens. But anyway, going back to the transition from you were working as a trader, you're into fitness. What was the transition out of fitness? What pulled you, 10-year brick and mortar anomaly, what pulled you out of that to put you into the path that you're on now?
Happens in 2 steps. So the first step starts to be this slow burnout. Right? We start to approach the decade mark, and definitely fatiguing of the pathway. It was a lot to run the business. We're very happy to do it. Some of my closest friends today are from that era
Did you
of
have
my
to
life.
expand it too? Are you like
did.
doing multiple brick and mortar places at the end of 10 years?
At the most, it was 2 locations. There was this experimental location just over the bridge in New Jersey.
Okay.
For some time, but we did expand it. We went to a larger facility in Philadelphia. So we did this one big move halfway through the journey, and then we're always poking around at that second experimental location.
So what was it a gym? Was it like classes and stuff, or was it more just like a straight up barbells?
It was a lot of personalization. So it was one of the more unique facilities out there in that it was split adults and kids. So my wife was a career gymnast, very, very high level gymnast. My favorite fun fact about her, she was a national vault champion at the end of the 90s, in 98. And so she was running a team quality gymnastics program and then expanding that. At the same time, I was running a high touch, I called it high performing professionals. My specialty was working with CEOs, doctors, lawyers, and really anybody. Profession didn't matter, but it was somebody who was extremely stressed, usually spending a ton of time on their core profession or what their life was focused on, didn't have necessarily much time for fitness and needed it to be done very efficiently. So it was a lot about me handling their hour or 2 hours per week in the facility and me giving them really efficient, simple, manageable strategies to execute outside of that. And that was really, that was my specialty. And so our facility combined those two things. And so it was, at the end of the day, it ended up being a lot of those professionals coming in on my side and their kids coming in on the gymnastics side.
It's a perfect symbiotic relationship where it's like, oh, well, we have a place for your kids too.
Yeah.
That's cool.
What pulled you were burnt out after 10 years. What pulled you into I hate the word Web3, but I just keep using it. Crypto, Web3.
I've gone fully back to crypto. I don't say
Crypto,
Web3 anymore.
crypto. Yeah, what pulled you into the crypto space?
Yeah.
Which is the opposite of brick and mortar.
So I've a great friend of mine has been steeped in crypto for a long time. And so year over year, I would just be talking to him. I remember Bitcoin first came across my radar in 10 or 11. Our first ever employee of the business said, I bought a Bitcoin. It was $20 at the time. And I said, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah.
And then a couple years go by. I started to give it serious consideration around 13, 14, was not ready yet. By 16, I said, this is a thing. Now my friend had sort of red pilled me. It wasn't until 18, 19 that I actually began to get into that. So it was a long process. Don't get me wrong. But around that 18, 19 mark, when I began to get into it myself, that was the burnout moment where I started to explore everything that wasn't fitness. So I said, let me reopen my business brain, trading brain, finance brain. And I explored stocks, crypto, collectibles, you name it. I was just casting my eyes out and just seeing what was out there and just sharpening myself back up. COVID hits, and COVID was either the worst or perfect timing, or however you want to consider it. I tend to use optimistic terms, right? So
it was the best thing that ever happened to us.
It rugged our business completely, and they're gone. Oh, but we were quicker, which ended up being a good thing because we heard some horror stories in the city from business owners who did push through, and good on them, but it was a very, very hard time. We pulled the plug over that summer and thought, again, that writing was on the wall, had the burnout in the back of our minds.
You were kind of already like mentally ready for that, so it made it easier.
Yes. And easier to take the pain of essentially something that we developed for quite some time just being lost instead of, sold or transitioned in some fashion. It just was lost at the end of the day. And so that was the moment where I began to get more and more serious about the other side of it. I find NFTs that summer. So at that summer, as we're losing the business, I'm doing some virtual corporate wellness oriented things. I think for a second that's going to be my permanent path. And then the rabbit hole begins. And it's
2020 summer.
2020 summer.
Was the,
NBA Top Shot.
It was right before, right as that nifty gateway season started to really ramp up.
That was what did it for me.
I think that like October drop with politics is bullshit. People with the dynamic 101 that was going to be off of if the election ended and Trump won, there was going to be a certain piece. If Biden won, it was going to be another piece with the dead Trump on the ground. And then the rest is history. What were some of the earliest like artists or the earliest projects that caught your attention when you were diving in, like what were some things that gave you the green light of like, oh, this is serious. Like this isn't just, you know, a collectible fad that I think is going to go away. Like what were some of the indicators for you early on?
That's an interesting question. It came at me from a number of angles. So there was the passion angle, which was I got really wrapped up in Beeple's journey and his story, Ferocious at the time, Mad Dog Jones, Victor Mascara. These are the names in late 2020 that are captivating me real time. And this is where I try to adopt a healthy market perspective overall. Like I try to be very balanced and measured when I think about the art market. And you think of, there are a ton of pros of that and there are some cons, but I tend to be very balanced. And one of the reasons is because I don't think I'd be here if it wasn't for the initial mini success of being able to go on a Nifty Gateway and see a tradable item that happened to be art at the time, but it was not my focus initially. A tradable item that had opportunity to move in and out and profit. If that didn't exist, I don't think I would have fallen down the rabbit hole that spits me out the other side as I think one of the strongest art advocates in the entire space.
The profit that you were able to get off a couple of those open editions was like
They were
nothing.
like $1 mints.
Well, those ones were tough too because it was like, you know, maybe some bots got it. But even the Beeple Open Edition in December, I bought one. It was under a couple $100 if I remember.
$969.
Yeah, and I sold it for like $5,000 within a week, and I was like, wow, this is a no-brainer. Like, it can't go up more than this. And then like 3 or 4 weeks later, it was $100,000. I'm just sitting there like, did I just fumble like generational wealth? Like we could have moved out of our 1-bedroom apartment off this one Beeple Open Edition. And then the next thing you know, it's like, oh, there's another thing that happened like that. And then another thing. But when you were getting into it, were you trading? Like, were you on Nifty Gateway at 7:00, like spamming, getting ready to trade it? Were you taking more of like a trader's mentality to the art space? And also before that, were you actually trading any of like the shit coins? Because I feel like that summer was, for me, like how I turned a little bit of money into a little bit more money was the shit coins. And that led to me collecting the art because I had shit coins to trade with. But that trading of the shit coins is one of the most degenerate, but also one of the best use cases the space had, especially in 2020. And you come from this trader background. So I'm curious, were you like in the trenches, traded any of the
Yield farming kimchi and
like were you yield farming anything? Or
I was not a shitcoin trader.
Okay.
So that,
Good for you.
That I didn't find it.
Okay.
You know, it didn't come across my radar at the time. So I actually started from the art side on Nifty Gateway first, then Maker's Place, then Super Rare. And
So
then
before you owned Bitcoin or ETH, you were actually like buying the NFT through Nifty Gateway. Like,
well, Bitcoin and ETH first.
okay.
But then nothing.
But you weren't trading your
No.
Bitcoin and ETH for something in the idea that you could get more Bitcoin or more ETH.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. And then Nifty Gateway was the first like growth.
Do you remember what your first like big win was?
My first NFT was Slime Sunday, Last Stand in the Nation State.
Okay.
It was the $40 open edition. That was the first time I tried to buy the Beeple in October.
The $1 one that sold out immediately.
But I didn't understand how quick I needed to be.
Yeah, I don't think anyone did.
You had to be lucky more than quick.
Yep.
You'd be quick and very lucky.
Yep. And then same thing for Ferocious' first drop. Same thing. I didn't understand yet what I needed to do. And then immediately was trading at multiples. I'm like, well, I don't know if I want to buy that at that level. And then I moved on.
Yeah.
Right. But the Slime Sunday one was an accessible open edition. The first accessible open edition, not the first open, but $40. I said, oh, this is the perfect time. And my wife gave me the green light. She's like, oh yeah, that's an easy one. Just go ahead.
That's an easy one.
That became the first NFT. Now, in terms of the first win, I mean, there were a few, but one good one was the Beeple release that you talked about.
Yeah.
That Beeple release was the game on moment. That was really, because don't get me wrong, there were successes prior to that, but that was a moment that sort of didn't stop. It was a 3-day release. It was like a 72-hour spectacular. It began with the open editions and a $1 release on night one. So it was 3 open editions, $9.69 each. It was the Bull Run, Into the Ether, and Infected. And the other side of it, you had the $1 Get Lucky. That was the scrolling all the 2020 artworks. It was called Every Day's Raw.
Yeah.
And then the next 2 days were these staggered auctions. The first night, I end up getting in there and I bought 1 Into the Ether and 1 Bull Run.
Nice.
And I took a step back. 969 over the course of that night becomes 1,500, 2,000, 2,500. So I ended up selling them like in the low 2000s. And what I did was I pivoted into everyday's raw.
Oh.
So those $1 editions were now selling on secondary. And I liked their path a little bit better than I did the others. But the funny thing that happened over the rest of the night is they never stopped. The Bull Run and Into the Ether went to 3,000 and 4,000. And this was a little bit different than the months prior, where you would see natural slowdowns. And it just
consolidation.
Yep, it just never happened. And I woke up the next morning and we were supposed to go to some family event or out with friends. I asked my wife, I said, hey, do you mind if I hang back today? I think something special's happening here. And then she's like, yeah, no problem. So they go, and I end up live tweeting the entirety of the next 48 hours. And that was the 48 hours where we learn after the fact that every single auction
was won by the same
was won by Metacoven, right? And all of this absolute madness
all these
ensues.
burner names. You're like, wow, who's Vincent? Who's Tom? Like,
Yep.
who are these names?
Yep. It was like the Usual Suspects moment at the end. I'll never forget that. And I end up, to show you how early we were and how there was just nothing, no resources tracking any of this stuff. I live tweet, call it like 60, 70 tweets throughout the next 48 hours. I wrap up, go to sleep, wake up that Monday morning, and I think it was like Decrypt or something, or Coin, whatever, picks me up as the expert in the industry. According to Roger, these are the volume numbers.
CoinDesk is
it may have even been CoinDesk. And it was somebody that just, it jarred me. And I said, there really is nothing here from a formal perspective. And I think that was one of those markers that emboldened me to then go in further, faster, and plant the flag.
So from there, what inspired you to create Artifex? Or
Artifex was the come in full time moment.
Okay.
That was really now I fell down the rabbit hole. I started as a trader, fell in love with the art. I started forming a ton of artist relationships. I started interviewing artists for NFT origin stories.
Yes.
All that is now going. And Artifex was I felt I needed to have a stable idea to really bring everything over. And that was the kickoff there.
And for the people who may not be aware, what is Artifex?
So Artifex, the mission revolved around 2 things. One, it revolved around the noise that we were seeing at the time, where I felt like NFTs were going to be everywhere, all over the place. Everyone wanted a piece, whether it was mainstream brands, artists who hadn't yet come into the space. And I was really interested in earmarking those who had contributed to sort of the rise of the NFT art space, as it were. So number one, it was about taking like a diverse cross section of the space and earmarking 100 artists. Right, as of today, just for listeners, we're at artist 41 out of the 100. So that mission is still intact. The other side of it is I wanted it to be future leaning, and so I'm a big believer. I don't know when. The Vision Pro is a cool start, maybe a cool start, but eventually, maybe not the version of the metaverse that we've all thought about. But eventually we are going to live in some form of mixed reality friendly existence. So I always believed that 3D objects held a special kind of magic. I was very interested in fine art, 3D sculptures. Yes. And so Artifex revolved around that concept. It revolved around bringing an artist in. They would create a unique one-of-one, revolving around a loose idea of like a metaphorical self-portrait. We would then take that. Art director Dirk at Work, who's a legend in the space, has been around for a long time. He would collaborate with the artist to then take the core character or object or whatever the central piece is and make the 3D sculpture that would complement the one-of-one. And my thought process is that the one-of-one across all these various artists as the metaphorical self-portrait would be just this amazing seed. And then from that, ideally would go everywhere, the sculptures and their possibilities. And so now the sculptures, you can bring them into OnCyber. Mm-hmm. We have a fully developed Apple app, so you can go anywhere. We could come in this room and start taking some snazzy pictures of all these sculptures And the goal, step by step, is just to put them in people's hands for all sorts of diverse expressions.
The Apple Vision Pro is going to be a very interesting, I think, inflection point with the tech, where it's the first one that I'm getting, or I'm going to try to get. We've been talking about it the last few days on the pods, and it's been a pretty common thing that comes up. It's like a lot of people are excited to get this.
Did you buy one, Deez?
What?
Did you buy one?
No, but I'm going to. Well, I learned too, it's pretty easy to get the prescription lens in it. Like it's like an extra $150 or $200. And for me, I can't use Jess's, she has what's the Steam one? It's the big ass Steam headset with like the full stuff. I can't wear it for more than 10 minutes. I get a blistering headache. Like the Facebook one, the Oculus, same thing. But I've never gotten prescription lenses for any of the VR. So the Apple one is like, okay, I can get this, easily get the prescription lens. Maybe I can use it for more than 10 fucking minutes. Because my issue right now is like, okay, I can use it for 10 minutes, but it's not a good 10 minutes. It's like I get a headache. This one is like, oh, I can, turn the VR off almost and be in like AR mode and see what's in front of me. It's a little less jarring. And it sounds like a bunch of people are going to be trying to flip them. We had Rhinotic on earlier, and he was like, yeah, I'm going to be making a play like the Saga phones. Just treating them like I can.
Interesting.
He knew the supply. I think he said there's 400,000 being launched in the beginning, and he's like, but I think it's going to be an unlock for a lot of the 3D stuff we've been talking about. Like the phone stuff's nice, but like I remember there was a Samsung phone where you could wear the Samsung phone.
Yeah,
as like
I remember that.
It's like it gets all hot. It's like we've come a long way since, and eventually, if I can get some pair of glasses that just shows 3D things in the room, but I don't need to, like, transporting a 3D sculpture, a big one, is fucking expensive. Getting it made is expensive. I made the mistake of buying one and then getting it refunded in the bull market because it's expensive. So the idea that we can very inexpensively display things and then tweak it is something that feels like it's right around the corner. And we've been saying this for like 3 or 4 years.
Yep.
Probably since when you started Artifex. You're thinking all about this stuff, but we're finally getting to that point where like, shit, like maybe the tech is getting close. Like we have the Ray-Ban glasses. And
the Meta Ray-Ban glasses.
Yeah.
Those are cool.
We started out, I think, with the Snap glasses. Those were the first ones.
Yep.
They came on our college campus with these big, like, it was kind of a viral thing. It's like, oh, what the fuck is this big yellow thing? And it's like, oh, you can buy them. But it didn't really do anything. Like people weren't that excited to use them, and if you wore it, people looked at you like you're weird. So I'm curious is when we get to a point where like, can I walk around with an Apple Vision Pro and people are gonna think I'm fucking weird? Probably.
Roger, did you pre-order the Vision Pros?
Not yet, but okay. I'm watching it very interesting. I mean, I haven't had time for a lot outside of the 24 hours endeavor, but this is something that is top of my list. It obviously furthers a lot that we've been working on for several years, and is like we did the Apple app as a precursor to, because we knew the Vision Pro was coming. And so we made an effort to get into and familiarize with the Apple ecosystem at that time. So yeah, very, very, very interested to see how it goes. And like you mentioned
too, like on Cyber, it looks great there.
Yeah.
Like I think we'll be able to hopefully walk around with the Apple Vision in the on Cyber gallery. Like that's kind of
probably eventually
part of the plan.
Least. Yeah, I feel like I'm like a boomer when it comes to the crypto space. Like I want less screens in my life, not more. Like I actually am most interested in the Vision Pro for replacing my desktop monitor, because there's been like really cool stuff as far as like connecting it with your Mac and using it for like development and stuff like that, which I think is really interesting. Basically just like the best fucking monitor that money could buy. But I like, at least right now, and I think part of it is just like, because I haven't used it, I have no interest in ever walking around with a VR or AR, like anything in my life, because like I use my phone enough, and I would like to have all that stuff way less in my life at this point. So I'm really curious to see how my opinion on that changes over time once it's like actually out in like a normal part of life. But at least right now, I'm like, please keep that away from me. I don't want it. So it'll be interesting.
But now that I never thought about buying one to flip it. Like that wasn't an idea until we talked to Adam. And then it was like, okay, well, I guess if I do get one, like, and I don't like it, I could just sell it and maybe even make money off it. Like maybe I just need to try to get it for that reason.
How much do they cost again?
$3,500.
Okay.
So my going idea is that if it's under 2 ETH, it's free. Yeah. And if it's over 2 ETH, it's too expensive. Like if ETH is 2,500, it's like, yeah, get one of those. Free.
Yeah.
But if ETH is under, 1,700, it's like, I can't do it, man.
So he said there's 400,000 of them.
Yeah.
So it's starting with a liquid market cap of 3,500 times 400,000. I can't do that math anymore.
Is that 120 million or 101.2 billion? I'm always off by a zero.
120 million. I think.
Yeah.
120 million.
120 mil.
Yeah. Do you ever, like, I know you're focused on all the art stuff. Do you actively trade or manage a portfolio, or are you mostly somebody who holds things like you stack Bitcoin and ETH and it's long term and you don't really like try to trade these swings? Like, over the last 3 to 6 months, we've had some interesting opportunities where like, oh, I can position in, this ecosystem and ride some pretty nice tailwinds and make more than just holding Bitcoin and ETH. Have you ever focused on that at all? Or is it just strictly like earlier where you said, I only bought the Bitcoin and ETH and never got into the trading stuff?
It's about time allocation.
Yeah.
And I feel when I've tried to do too much and spread myself too thin, I've only hurt myself. And so for me, it was a lot about the art that I have, like shifting it to a perspective of,
because you don't actively trade the art you have either.
No. So
like, I don't think of you as like an active, like, there's some people we talk to and
the floor's looking thin.
Yeah, floor's looking thin, wheeling and dealing. Oh, I can't believe I set this auction price of this historical piece at 90% less than I bought it and no one's bidding. But like, yeah, I don't never get that from you. Like, you're never tweeting about the wins or the flips or anything, but I had to ask.
Towards early Artifex days, I realized pretty quickly, because my days would just be consumed by everything that has to get done, right?
Yeah.
I realized very quickly I can't actively trade, nor is it necessarily my top priority right now. So everything that I have, I'm just going to start to position it so this is vaulted. I'm comfortable with this. I'm happy with this. And it's how I tend to think about everything.
Were you how are you thinking about sustainability? Because for a lot of us, like, the trading part is how we're able to sustain ourselves in this space.
For sure.
How are you thinking about sustainability as somebody who is like, okay, I'm not going to allocate my time to the trading because it's going to spread me too thin in the other paths I want to go down?
I mean, really, I think a bear market's the time for sustainable business models. And for me, it was thinking about, I'm thinking about 24 hours of art through that lens, where I'm being very slow with it. I'm being very measured with it, but I'm also being very real with it. I'm being very real. A couple months in, I gave myself a honeymoon phase of several months where I said, I'm going to spend a significant chunk of time every single day to do this for no reason other than to do it.
Yeah.
But after a certain frame of time, you realize you have to make this sustainable at some point.
I got to make money on this.
Right.
Like, you can't spend half your day doing something for free forever.
Exactly. And so there was
a lot of money.
Right. There was that very natural point where I looked at it with sober eyes and just said, what do we got here? Am I passionate about this still after doing it every day for this period of time? Yes. 2, do I feel like there's enough on the other side? Am I delivering value? Right. I felt yes. That was the moment I was starting to get all these inbounds. Can I advertise with you? Can you give up a % of ownership of this? And I didn't say yes to any of it, but it was all good signs. Very respectfully, thank you, not the right time, appreciate you. But it was like checking the box of there's something here. Let's keep moving this forward. And then of course it was, okay, now I have to figure out what the business model is. And really the way I look at it is like 50-50. I didn't want to do the shoot the moon and try to sell a token for an exorbitant amount of money. Not the right time, but it's also not a model that you see how some of those models end. And
We've seen it play out.
You see it play out.
Expectations get way too out of line. You can't make any of the holders happy with those disillusioned expectations. Then you're spending too much time either putting out fires on social media, or like you can't even use social media because of the people who have the delusional expectations are now in your replies anytime you tweet about anything. So you saw what happened.
It's the perfect framing, and I thought long and hard about it, and I had a lot of serious dialogues with several people, a couple handfuls of people, and I was vetting. Do I do 10K at super low cost? is there initially 1,000 was the mental marker.
Okay.
And then very late in the game, I said, doesn't feel right. Doesn't feel right. Doesn't match the concept. What matched the concept was the token per day.
Yeah.
Mark the history. We have a very serious art path. Like, I mean, that's another topic, but those ART designs are actually done really, I think, well. I'm biased, but they open up a lot of doors. They're rendered in 4K. They're 3Dable. There's all sorts of stuff that's possible. They're printable. There's all sorts of stuff that's possible with them that we haven't even really touched on. But to match the concept, 1 per day, 366. Also found out late in the game, 2024 is a leap year. I was saying 365, 1 per day. And then I remember
February 29th.
one day someone wrote back in socials, oh, so you're skipping a day. And I'm like, skipping a day? What do you mean I'm skipping a day? It's a leap year. 366, so of course it became 366 tokens.
What a fucking stupid concept leap years are.
Yeah, I know.
God.
Yeah.
I don't even know how we got on a leap year. Like, I don't know the story behind them. But
The history of leap years.
when you made the switch from 1K to 366 later on, was that something that came to you? Was that through a conversation with Transient? Was that, because I think it's smart. Like, when I think of collectors in the space, like, I don't know if there are 1,000 serious collectors.
You're inviting in, what you're essentially wanting to do at that point is encouraging someone to buy 20.
Mm-hmm.
That right. If you're gonna go 1,000 tokens, you have to have
Like
people.
tiers. It's like, oh, if you own 10, you get this.
It's like Moondog just expressed that they have 75 of the 1,000 Velocity Series passes. You need that to do 1,000 tokens.
To sell those out.
No, so I'm one of what I consider my own superpower. We all have to have our strengths, right? I think one of my greatest strengths is synthesis. So I try to go out and talk to the people that I respect, knowing that I'm going to get a lot of different opinions. So I'm not going to attach these to names, but I had distinct, clear, like all-in opinions. Like, we feel very strongly about this, from you shouldn't do tokens at all. You should no tokens.
Do like a $10 a month subscription.
Only subscription. Don't put yourself in that position.
Yeah.
That was
Raise money, give us a % of it.
that was an opinion from people that I greatly respect. And you go to the other side. I had staunch opinions. Do it mass access, low cost, token economy, 10K. And so you sit there and you talk to the people you love and you trust, and you understand their whys. And at the end of the day, it was the synthesis of all of that. And it was just saying, it's got to match the concept. That was the key. It has to match the concept. And when the concept came together that we were going to do the art piece, it just made sense. You own a day. You possess this day. Everything that we end up doing with that day, based on what occurs that day, will be yours. That made sense. It clicked, and then it was game on. But at the end of the day, it's 50-50. That's the way I'm looking at this. I didn't want to say this is an NFT only endeavor. And all the money that needs to go to the small agile team that we have around this, all that comes from NFTs. I didn't want to put the business, as it were, in that position. So the way I'm really looking at it is 50%-ish through the token portion, 50%-ish through putting the brand in really strong positions where it matches really well to two things. It matches really well to customized reports for certain entities, whether that be collectors, funds, right? Or artists. A couple, 1, 2, 3 artists who want to go really deep into the data, into their reporting, into their worlds. I think the brand matches really well to those, as well as some stuff on the periphery, where who's your concierge service, right? If this becomes what I want it to be, which is a growth engine, which is when people from the outside of the space coming in understand that this is where you can look to find out what's going on, what's relevant, what's real. Concierge service for that person to be able to get digital art, screens, security. There are natural things that won't
OTC stuff potentially. Like,
right.
I could totally see you like signing off each email with like, have some pretty cool deals available, for X, Y, and Z artists. If you're interested, hit me up, and like having reach for collectors that way and stuff too. Like, there's tons of stuff there.
Yeah, and it's as long as it doesn't impact the core of the report, we're good. And that was the biggest thing, because a lot of my early inbounds were, we have this idea, but it's going to require you to sort of change your report to lift this idea up. And then I don't have anything anymore. Then that it moves me off of what I feel like is the most powerful substance here, which is you're reading an independent report.
Yes.
At most, I'm curating an image, but even that, I can only go so far. I'm not going to curate it's not going to be the 23rd line item down. I'm beholden to really report what's going on, and I feel very good about that. And so I think as long as I stick to that, it'll be differentiated.
I feel like it's very unbiased too. Like there are other newsletters or art market reports that go out, and I won't name any names, but they put very biased language in the report. Like that, I just read something is quite frankly fucking ridiculous.
I think I know what you're talking about.
And it compared the project Itty Bits to being the mutant apes of punks. And it's by a very prominent collector. And I just read it and I almost spit out my drink. I'm like, are you fucking serious? Like, how many of these did the...
So I wonder why he would be saying this.
Wonder how many he bought before putting this newsletter out there.
Yeah.
No, let me just go look at the chain. That's okay.
Yeah, well, I feel like that's something where the quality and like, over time you can just tell what's unbiased and what isn't. Like to me, another kind of daily update thing that I really trust and I feel like is unbiased is like Lucky Trader.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
They put out stuff all the time, and I feel very confident that when I read a tweet from Tyler or Lucky Trader that they're not selling me something, they're not pumping something, and like over time it's very easy if you're active in the space to sift through what's the noise and what's serious, and like it matters.
Yep.
And we see it too. Like as people who are reading this every day, it's like I know when this hits my inbox and I read it, it's like this is objectively the largest sales of the day. There's not like, oh, at the bottom, this thing that just feels out of place. It's like, no, like this is all good stuff. Like I never feel like you're like trying to put my attention on something that like is something that you may have a vested interest in. I mean, I know it's you do it every day, but like I know that the information is very unbiased. I think it's really important.
And what's so important about that too, and this is what I say, like this is my public service announcement, right? If something meets a threshold of ETH or Sol or Bitcoin, now that I'm sort of doing multiple chains, but if something meets a threshold and it's not on the report, you need to know, flag it for me, please. I'm encouraging, like reach out to me and say, hey, know that I don't leave anything off. If something is within the art lane and it exists on ETH, Bitcoin, Sol, and it belongs in this category above a threshold, I'm either capturing it all or I'm real-time learning why something was not there and fell through the cracks. And why that's important is someone reached out to me the other day and said, oh, why poking at the demographics of it. And I said, listen, I am as empowerment to everybody as they come. I feel like I'm extremely open to that, but I am reporting you know what this is. I know what this is. We can all look at it with the same eyes. And if something exists above this threshold, like for example, the other day I was on a Spaces and was it Siobhan or was Art Jedi was like, why wasn't this on the report? And I was like, tell me more about it. And they told me about it. And I said, that was a miss. It has nothing to do with anything.
Yeah.
That was a literal miss. And I understood, oh, that was a different chain. It happened here. That's why it was missed. Won't be missed again. And I'm just trying to put that thought into everyone's minds that there's no intent other than here are our standards. Let's go. I mean,
that's one of those things where it's like a little bit ridiculous to even have to say that, but I know that people are so defensive of the things that they own. But it's like, of course you're not going to get everything. It'd be impossible to. And so I'm actually curious. I was going to ask you, and this transitions well into that. Like, what is you talked about your process for writing it a little bit and all that. What is your actual process for finding everything? Because that to me just feels like chasing a million chickens with their heads
we
cut
had
off.
this problem with Escher. It was like trying to find everything an artist has done and
It's
index
so
it
hard.
and keep up with it. Like I'm definitely curious outside of just like, OpenSea, Blur, Super Rare, whatever. Like how do you track everything that goes on?
So it's like I'm confident 80% of what I do is probably replicable. But then there's whatever the percentage is. There's the less percent. But it's that's unfortunately what takes a lot of time, but it's also I think what makes the resource what it is. So you have your aggregators and marketplaces. And it's a very straightforward list. It's
Sort by highest amount, sort by volume.
boom. So you're gonna have your OpenSea deep dive. You're gonna have your NFT Price Floor and Crypto Slam and all these aggregators. And so I essentially do like a double, triple check where I will go through several of the prominent aggregators as well as major marketplaces. Then you spin off into your smaller marketplaces, right? I guess they're not small, but they're smaller just relative to the volume that's being passed through within the art lane.
For sure.
So that's your Nifty Gateways and your Makers Places and your known origins. Not as relevant now, but still it has to be checked.
Still.
Every once in
there
a
was
while, there's an X copy
1 out
that
of
gets
15
sold.
X copy.
Yeah.
Exactly. So you just have to go through that checklist, and then you sort of you go down Manifold Road, and you go down Daily, and you go down Ninfa, and now you have to keep, again, going down that checklist. And then past that, it reaches an interesting point where now you get to the relationships, singular artists, specific bots, OTC deals. And that is not an exact science right now. That is just being willing to be plugged in on a daily basis, hours a day, find the stuff. I guess you do develop like the tens of people resource lists that you're more likely to find
like
that stuff
a
through.
private Twitter list.
How do I know when Curated bought something OTC? Like that would be a hard thing to me. Is how you track those kind of things.
You
don't always know, I guess, but you can try.
You don't know. So a couple of the cool things that have happened during this process, just being obsessed, was finding some. I was the breaker of a number of the different Sotheby's deals.
Yeah,
and that was just sheer will of just
it's on chain.
Checking the chain.
It's just getting in there, getting into the trenches, finding something that you think is relevant. No, you may see a transfer, but you don't necessarily know why it occurs.
Yeah.
Sometimes it transfer. Like one of the big ones was found where it was transferred to a wallet that Sotheby's still had. But I thought it was curious that these pieces were transferred. So I reached out directly and said essentially, hey, and this is part of the due diligence that I think is necessary to report well, where it wasn't just saying like, hey, everybody, these are moved. We don't know why.
Alert.
Breaking this already makes you in the top like 0.0001% of anyone who ever reports on anything online. So good job.
Let's keep going. So, but it's just saying like, I don't know why this occurred. Now think of all the reasons why it could have occurred. Well, the major ones are, okay, this is being prepped for sale. Or this is being prepped for sale, like going public auction, because they do all these events. You know, they especially after they got the Starry Night collection, they split them off. They do these mini auction events. So it could be going out for a public sale that's coming, or it could be a deal. And so reached out, and then that was a cool day because I ended up being on air for the public spaces as I get the message back hours later that's like, this is a sale. And then it's okay.
Break it.
And that was the 9-piece Fidenza Ringer 3X copy 101s. That was that one.
I've been very impressed with, there was a lot of stress, baby, back between March and May about the 3AC collection becoming available. Like you're looking at it, and I don't remember the exact numbers, but let's just say they had 30 Ringers, 18 or 20 Fidenza. I could be completely off, but there was a double-digit amounts, and all of us holding a Ringer, Fidenza, whatever. Like I sold a Ringer and a Fidenza before the 3AC auctions because I was like, man, I don't know if they're gonna have buyers for all these. And the fact that they've been able to place that whole collection in the market has generally just gone up has been a pretty impressive display of like buying pressure that I didn't know the market had dormant.
That I think is the strongest. We get in all these in the weeds discussions about what's the role of an auction house. Are they a net positive? Are they a net negative? Does it matter? Do we need them? At the end of the day, I think a very impartial eye would look at this situation and say Sotheby's did the thing here.
I think in general, they've done a great job, even outside of just this. Sorry to interrupt you, but like, even outside of just this thing, I've been very impressed by their presence.
I agree. I like Michael quite a lot. I think just understands how to navigate those kinds of situations with as much grace as you can expect, right? Of course, a lot of this stuff, people will clamor, it should be on blockchain, it should be, I get it, but we have to understand that trad art is operating the exact opposite of how quote unquote Web3 or crypto art operates. And so there has to be, I think, a bit of a middle ground or a bit of slack given for these types of situations. Completely understand why some of these buyers are not going to want their transactions on chain, nor may Sotheby's. And so A plus effort in terms of what they've done with the Starry Night collection.
Yeah, I think that was one of the stronger bear market signals for me as a collector. Was like, wow, there is a lot of dormant demand here that I quite frankly didn't realize existed.
Yeah, I think it also goes to show, because at that same period of time, like the floors for a lot of those collections were like not great, but
Yeah,
when they had some nicer stuff, like it still moved, and there were people who were willing to buy it if it was priced right.
especially
And that
some
was,
of
like, a
those
little
ringers
surprising.
and
Yeah.
some of the Fidenza, like they weren't floors. It would have felt weird to floor some of them, and it seems like they got buyers who were willing to pay the premiums.
I'm sure they got a pretty good deal still, but
Yeah, all things relative.
when it's a
but,
liquidation event, you probably get some good deals.
but you have to meet them where they are too. Like if we can, it does stink that we don't really know the demographic of the buyers, because I think it would be cool to know. Like,
I could probably take a guess.
yeah, I'm sure Mr. Howard bought some.
I bet you Mr. Howard bought some.
Mr. Howard's one
Yeah.
of our favorite patrons. From Brevin Howard. His name's Alan Howard. He's this billionaire over there. But he was somebody in 2021 when he came on this scene, and it was like, holy shit! Like, what if another person like this guy got in, and then that's all it takes to drive up some of these prices. Like the art dynamics are so interesting compared to some of the other stuff we trade. It's like it really only takes two people who really want something to drive up an auction. And the Sotheby's stuff, even like the penguins, I mean, they've gone up a ton since
They're at
Spencer
like almost
bought them.
13 ETH now, right?
Yep.
Crazy, because they had a bunch of like PFPs too. Like it wasn't just, oh, we have ringers and Fidenza and X copies. It was like, oh, we got a bunch of PFPs too, and they've placed all of it.
So I'm curious, you mentioned a bit kind of like you outside of like volume and things like that, you do have to at a certain point make a decision as far as what you include that is art or isn't art. Do you have kind of your own personal rules that you've written down before the fact of like, this is kind of where I draw the line of like, I will include this versus not include this, or do you kind of do it live depending on?
I have rough rules that I walked in. I will say that I think the hardest of the circumstances is what to do with Jack.
Yeah.
What do we do with Jack Butcher?
He's in his own category.
He's in his own category. I call him the Volume King. I call Jack Butcher the Volume King. I have by the way, fan of Jack since prior to NFTs. Before I'd ever heard the acronym, I was a fan of Visualized Value. I think his eye and his approach is really second to none. And so I am a bit biased to want to include Jack, but I will admit it's one of my question mark points because it is one of there are several very high quantity collections. OPEPin through one lens can be a PFP collection. Through another lens, collaborates obviously a lot of artists. And I believe, by the way, for the record, he is one himself. What do you do there? What do you do? And I feel the way that I've handled it is typically to put it in the collection highlights. So very rarely am I breaking out, even if there's like, let's say a check sale or a higher end OPEP, very rarely am I breaking that out and putting it into the other categories because it is, again, such a en masse collection. I feel comfortable with that decision for now, but you're right. You're right to call that out. There are those decision points that are not, it's not clear.
Yeah. Like one that came to mind for me more recently was Shlome's did some ERC20 token stuff where he had one that like didn't have a ticker and one that had a ticker that was like infinitely long. And I was like, I think it is art, but like, do you include the daily volume of this ERC20 token on your list? And I think those are really interesting questions. And I'm sure you will have many more of them over
as
the
artists
coming years.
continue to blur the lines.
Yeah. And just as the medium changes, because like it's one thing when artists are making things on paper or, canvas or sculptures, but you're working on this in the space where like the literal medium is changing all the time. And so it's like inscriptions did not exist a year or, however long ago. And like, what is the next thing that's going to happen where to some amount of people, they're going to say, oh, this is maybe it's not NFT artwork, but it's crypto artwork because it's some other unique thing. And so that it'll be a fun challenge over time, I think.
You mentioned earlier too, trying to keep up with the other chains, whether it's Bitcoin, Solana, Tezos, whatever, there's notable sales. Have you been using, in particular, Bitcoin or Solana yourself to collect any art recently?
Not as much recently. I have collected Bitcoin artwork.
Yeah.
And I do think that's important, but I just, again, haven't been able to spend time, right? Ample time on there, really going through it. I have really strong contacts in both worlds. I actually, funny enough, was exploring in before 24 Hours of Art hit full steam, I had been exploring ordinals at a very serious level related to Artifex and thinking through what it would take to do a really creative endeavor. So I had a number of different dialogues, just critically thinking about the potential of ordinals. So I feel very comfortable with that ecosystem. Solana I've come around to over the course of the past few months.
Yeah.
And again, have some people that I love over there, Keegan, Goku, among them. And now, I just think it needs to be considered and it needs to be in the report. And a couple huge Solana advocates are part of the 24 Hours group now.
Yeah.
And I find it contributes to a lot of healthy discussion.
It was a whole new ecosystem for me to learn about. I hosted a space back in the middle of December with Keegan. And it was like, talk to John Lay, talk to Zeno, talk to a couple of these artists who have sold, millions of dollars worth of art on Solana. And it's like, wow, you guys have a whole other ecosystem that honestly, I was a little too ignorant of it, and it was good to learn about. But it is hard to try to keep up with it. The experience on the ordinals and the Solana,
It's like polar opposite.
it's night and day. I've been saying this meme that Bitcoin is the vintage luxury chain. It's not fast. It's not the best user experience. It's expensive. So it's like vintage luxury. But if you do put out an ordinal or an inscription, it's like Bitcoin is the most lindy chain. Like Bitcoin, whether we love ETH or we love Sol or we love anything, it's like, well, Bitcoin is going to be the one
It's still
that
Bitcoin.
is most likely to be around in 50 or 100 years. So like putting your art on there is a serious endeavor. It's more expensive, but it's also like, I don't know. It's like you're putting your stamp on the most lindy chain. Whereas like Solana is like, you send the transaction, it's a millipenny fee, and it shows up in your wallet immediately. And it's like, oh, cool, I got it. But like the Bitcoin experience is so opposite of that. Like I waited 3.5 hours one day because I didn't use the right gas. And it was like, well, that was kind of jarring, but like I kind of felt good about it after. So I was curious, like if you were buying or selling any of them, how you liked it, because I think a lot of people, they will hear people talk about ordinals and then they're like, oh, the user experience sucks, I don't want to buy it. But then they don't have that same mentality towards Solana. Like they'll hear about Solana and they won't think like, oh, the user experience is great, I got to try it. It's like they still won't try it. So I was curious, like I need to try to get, I've been trying to tell people like, just try the stuff yourself. Like don't make an opinion on it until you go buy something and involve yourself in that community, because like it's so, I don't know, it feels different than ETH. Like the ETH culture, because that was where everyone came in 2021. It's like you buy it on ETH, Nifty Gateway goes to ETH. It's all ETH. And it's like people just defaulted into like, well, we have to use ETH. And it's like, well, we actually have like all these other things we can now use. So I'm definitely curious, because Tezos is a place where I collected a lot of art, but you probably don't see that high of sales on Tezos.
Right.
Like if you're looking at just the US dollar value and volume, it's like not that high on there anymore. But they do have a lot of great art. So it's hard, because I know like some of those communities probably might reach out to you and be like, hey, why didn't you include any of this stuff? And it's like, well, it didn't crack the minimum threshold. One thing I did want to talk about, you mentioned comic books earlier, and we were talking a little bit about the art behind the art tokens. Were they inspired by comic books at all? Because when I see the ART, I think of like the big comic book font, like, the top third of the page taking up all the space, constantly changing, but being the same general form. Like, how did you come up with the idea for, hey, I want to make this art concept, I want this to be an art piece? And then how did you come up with that? And then how did the partnership with Transient come up? Because I feel like they're kind of integral into the whole role of being able to create this piece every day and then put it out there.
For sure. Okay, so the art first. The art logo first. That was really the roots of that were developed in 2021.
Okay.
And the designer at the time was the Grammys creative director. So we had this, he was off doing some great things, had time for the project. And so we cracked into it, and the goals there were lasting, like strong brand, lasting brand, core iconography. So the Artifex logo, by the way, has the ART at the center of it.
Yes.
Right? It has a frame around it. Another purpose of that logo was to only exist in black and white. And the philosophy there was that artists are the art. They are the color. So the brand takes a step back it offers up a black and white canvas, and then the artist is the entity filling up that canvas.
Gotcha.
So that's the origin story of the Artifex logo, which then goes to Times Square and Miami and all sorts of different places. So there was a decision point with 24 Hours of Art. What's going to be used here for the core iconography of this brand? And I quite liked the essential ART, and I felt like there was a symbiosis there. There was sort of a joint North Star, which is the art.
Yeah, it's the art.
And this is very applicable to this endeavor. So we started looking at various ways to frame it, various shapes and sizes. Artifex is square, square dimensions. This ends up not being square. This ends up being golden ratio. And so we were experimenting with it. And I say we, it's the Artifex team. Justin Wetch is spearheading the art, fabulous artist that I've had the pleasure of working with for several years now. And so we just started going deeper and deeper and deeper and saying, should the ART be on it? Should it not? How are we going to encapsulate what happens during the day? I was very adamant that it can't be the literal artworks. It can't be, we're going to take the top 3 highlights and we're going to cut them and just have, you can look at them and you know exactly what you're looking at. We have to have, there needs to be some interpretive factor to this, ideally some elevation, brings all of this together. And those were the roots of the conversation. And then that just came together step by step. Obviously, texture is very important to us. 3D is very important to us. And what you are seeing roll out now is, I think of it as the middle ground. I think of it as the hybridization of data and art, where it begins as the report, starts as the art of the artist, then becomes the data of the report, and then now becomes the hybridization, where you see in the background of these ARTs is often the text. Obviously, that sometimes is very obvious.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a little bit more muted, but it's really that interplay of, hey, the conceptual statement I'm trying to make here is then not to get too out there or too woo-woo with it, but like we're in a really unique time right now. And this is a 24/7, 365 public ledger. That's really interesting. It's putting artists in a far different position than they've ever been in. It's onboarding weird new collectors of all different shapes and sizes, raising my hand, This is really intriguing. And so I really value that hybrid step. And then the state, I don't think a lot of people necessarily have paid attention, but at the end of the year, the end game is artwork. The ART falls away and you're now left with a pure artwork expression.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah. See, this is why I'm big on a brand philosophy. I want to give a shout out to a friend, Steve Gross. He wrote a book called Brand Mysticism. He's a fabulous, wild thinker in just marketing in general, but had a chance to break bread with him and just understand how he thinks. One of my favorite analogies, it's probably not unique to him, but he just voiced it the best where it really hit home. He looks at a brand like an onion, right? He's really a brand builder at the end, but he builds brands that stand the test of time. It's like when you pull the layers of the onion back, what do you find? Is there anything in there? Or does it just deflate and it's empty? I really value trying to build something that lasts. And so I like layers to the onion. So the cool thing is, as I go around and sort of survey people that are coming aboard the 366 tokens, it's like, why'd you come aboard? And oftentimes the answer is, I saw you were doing something and I wanted to support it because you've been writing great art reports. And while that, thank you, right? Like, thank you. That's amazing. And patronage is an amazing thing. I'm obsessed with a collaborative win-win. I'm obsessed at developing something that can ultimately serve all of us. And so it's like, I'll take that answer and be like, thank you, but now we're going here. We're going to try to go here, you know? And those are the layers of the onion. So there's layers to the art, that being what you didn't even realize yourself.
Yeah.
That's where that process goes.
So how do the artworks that get put onto the art itself, how does that get chosen? Because you said it's not just, I'm going to take the top 3 things of the day, put the art in there. Like, how do you choose what? Sometimes like the squiggle one, for example, it goes across all of them. Like, how is the artistic process for you when it comes to creating that daily token?
Justin has sort of allowed me to have this be. Artifex is a lot about collaboration. Artifex is Victor Mascara comes aboard Artifex, and it's a lot about, he's literally creating his own artwork. Dirk at work is then collaborating with Victor to bring that into 3D. I am quality controlling the whole process and managing the team and sort of leading us from point A to point B to point C, but I'm not in that. I might make some creative decisions on an expression of this. I might notice something, but I'm not really, I don't view myself as like really leading that creative endeavor from like a backroom perspective. Justin has allowed me to do that here. And so I'm expressing my OCD to these ART pieces. I am trying to capture, and yes, some curation is required here. I am trying to capture the day as best as I can. Now, what does that mean? Differentiation is what I'm looking for. So I'm looking for what's different about this day. For example, if a Fidenza sells on any day, there's a good chance it's going to be the high sale of the day.
Yeah.
Does that mean it should always dominate the ART? Probably not, because we're going to see Fidenzas sell throughout the year. Every
half
month.
the days would just be Fidenza.
It'll be more rare when there is a Fidenza sale.
Yeah.
Right. And same thing with Xcopy.
Yeah.
Xcopy is sort of the Fidenza of crypto art.
Yes.
Right. What do you do with that? Now, Xcopy has been on a number of these ARTs, but I'm also actively attempting to differentiate. For example, on a day that he could outstrip a lot of others, but it's no different than any other day in the Xcopy ecosystem, does that truly define that day? That's the decision I'm looking to make. So a couple days in the early going were a lot about equal representation of the ART. For example, the first day of January 1st, 2024 was a true multi-chain day where there was something significant that happened on Bitcoin, something significant that happened on ETH, something significant that happened on Solana. And it was a lot about none of them really leap out at you. It's about painting the canvas with all of the different chains. Then there are other days, like Grant Yoon's Overpass is one of my favorites because we're able to express that really prominently in the background. Joe P's same thing.
Yes.
When that artwork privately sold. So it that does require curation, but I am trying to do my damnedest to express creativity in a positive way where we can look back and truly know what those differentiating moments were. And then Justin's doing a brilliant job on the execution side of that. Oftentimes a day, I'll load him up with like a little page. Here's our date. Here are our artworks. This is clear. This has to be the highlight. The color palette. Here are our options. And then he's going, and there are many days where he's very additive to that process, where he'll come back at me and say, I went at it from this angle. And I'll say, I didn't even think of that. So it ends up being a really beautiful collaborative effort that takes several hours each day.
It's good that you have this working relationship with him for so long that you can have that. Well, I took your idea, but like I had this idea, and then you get something you're like, oh, holy shit, that's way better. When it comes to displaying the art, like I know Xcopy, his work is CCO, some of the work isn't. Do you have to like get clearance from any of the artists that you display, or is it rendered in such a way that it is like different enough from the parent that that's not a concern?
The latter.
Okay.
These pieces are indisputably and that goes back to, you will every now and again see, let's say the Joe P's piece was one that was a big enough moment, a rare enough moment that decided to be a little bit more heavy-handed with it in the background, but we're still taking a fraction of a screen of a long
fraction of one frame, long clip. Yeah.
So that was, I wanted to be so far on the right side of that where I didn't want to take artworks literally, right? And so a lot of that is the textural interplay, what we do with the palette over top. I think it's a bridge further than far enough, right?
Yeah, and I'm sure, like, I mean, my hunch is that 90+% of the artists are like honored to be on the art token. Like they wouldn't be against like, oh, my work, I don't want to see that there. Like to them, that's probably pretty fucking cool to be a part of that history. That's
a special part of this where you said 90+%, and I hope every artist, I hope, no, you're spot on though, because I think, hey, some people might not understand what we're doing, what this is all about, right? But at the end of the day, I hope when someone listens to something like this, and listens to a deeper dive as to the intent here, what this actually is, it's we're trying to be very respectful about how we handle this, where the artists of the space are clearly the inspiration to why this even exists.
Yes.
Right? It's marking their moment in history. And I say that 'cause a lot of artists will come and they'll thank me. They'll say like, thank you for doing this. This is value additive. And I'll say, I appreciate you saying that. I just need you to know this doesn't exist without you, right? There's a clear order of operation here, right?
You make the art.
Right. And it literally a market forms around that art. And then now resources that ideally are growth oriented, like 24 hours, form around that. And symbiotically, we all move this thing forward. And so the message to the artist is to say, it's like, hey, we're trying to do this in the most respectful way possible to where we can all look back on it. And whether you get that initial take of Grant Yoon's Overpass or Joe Pease's piece, or you zoom into the ART and you see a Beeple texture or an Xcopy texture, or you zoom into the backdrop and you actually start reading some of the line items where you can get in there. I mean, these are very, very zoomable pieces, but we can all look back together and smile at it. And the most fulfilling moments for me in the early going here, outside of the collectors who are forming this token body, which is it's everything. D's, thank you.
Thank you.
The artist, when Rafiq retweets a design that includes him in it, it's like a little cosign. It's like, hey, this is cool.
Yeah.
Or Per Christian Stovelin commented the other day and said, it's an honor. And I'm like, it's an honor. Like,
Yeah,
but
it goes both ways.
Those are the beautiful moments where it does feel like, keep going. This is cool. Let's go. And ideally, this brand becomes extremely value additive to the artist as well.
I think you're doing a great job with it. And for me, it was like a no-brainer. Like I said, I was consuming every day, get the email. You saved me probably 2 hours. I'm not a very productive person when it comes to keeping an eye on the art market. It's like, oh, let me check the bot. Oh, let me go on Super Rare. Oh, let me go here. And like, I meander throughout my day. Whereas with you, it's like, I can sit down in 30 seconds, 90 seconds, it's done. And it's like, I would pay more than the price of the token to get that service for a year. Like, it's a no-brainer from a collector perspective. A very important question I've been meaning to ask: has anyone minted day 420?
Yes.
Fuck. Okay.
So initially June 9th was minted before, because the two popular dates to ask about are June 9th and April 20th. In the early going, June 9th was minted, but 420 was still out there. And you bet I was thinking about you because you minted 4 days off.
But I minted one and I got April 16th. All the days in the year, I'm like, I got it.
That's brutal.
4 days away from 420. So it minted. Do you know who got it?
I don't. It was not.
Okay.
It was not someone obvious, but I'll keep on it.
Drop a WETH bid on there and see if they even pay attention to what they have.
I'll keep on it. You know what's funny about the minting process is the mint has gone slow and strong.
Yeah.
It's just every day. Not one day. This is kind of fun. Not one day has gone by since mint that somebody has not come aboard the token body. And not one day has gone by since the Telegram group launched that somebody else hasn't been added to the Telegram group. That is fun. That can't go on. It literally cannot go on forever, literally. But it's very encouraging the way it's all coalescing together.
I feel like you're building the right group of people too. It's not like you said, hyped mint, trying to sell out immediately, trying to sell 10,000 of them, trying to promise the world and, hype up people's expectations. It's a very deliberate, very thoughtful, even on all the spaces you do, you're very, even on this conversation, like you're very thoughtful and deliberate about what you're building. And I think that comes through, albeit, more slower. It's a slower burn, but you're getting the right people. Like, I don't see people just minting and like flooring it like right after they mint.
Well, and I'm the first to admit, like, anything can change at any moment. We know that but one of the things that I find incredibly validating of the concept is, as well as I do, you guys know as well as I do, a mint that doesn't mint out immediately, and immediately sometimes means hours, but at least means a couple days. Typically you'd see things trend on the secondary, like almost immediately down.
Like undercut the mint price when it doesn't mint out.
And again, things can change at any moment in time, and it's about executing and continuing to fulfill this vision. But as we sit here today, as the mint, has 50 some odd editions left and is moving at that everyday couple pace, until sellout, the floor is still triple mint.
Yeah.
That to me is like really special, where it's an anomaly. And the goal is to create a brand that can continue to be that. And the reason why you minted, but not even understanding the end game here.
Yeah.
And Medved said the same thing, and so many others have said the same thing. Now that brings a smile to my face and joy in my heart, because now it's like the people who have come aboard within this slow mint, now we get to sort of go to that end game together, and I find that very fun.
Yeah, the Telegram is great too. My Telegram has been muted the last few days as we do the pods, and then I come out and it's just like, oh my
man,
goodness.
All the way
it's
down.
Popping.
Yeah,
you got a good group of people there. Is there like 150 people in it now or something?
167
like
as of today. Yeah.
So how many unique holders are there out of the
So
330 some minted?
Yeah, let's say so out of the 366, I think we're at 310. Let's use ballparks. Let's say it's 310 minted. We're at almost 260 unique.
Okay, so about 110 people who haven't hopped in the Telegram yet.
And
exactly.
So you've talked a lot about the brand and like wanting to build a brand that lasts. Really, really basic level. How did you come up with the name for? I mean, it's very, very straightforward, obviously, but I would imagine that you actually spent a lot of time deciding. How did you decide on the name?
The endeavor, it was a funny thought process where I sat down with myself, and sometimes I have a way of getting a little too complex. And this is a complex brand for the reasons we just discussed, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when I was launching the report, I wanted to hit it on the nose. I wanted someone to be able to read the titling and understand what this was about. 24 hours of art. Like, that's what it is. That's what it covers. It's how you can talk about it. Now, well, the inevitable future of the brand, I mean, it coalesces very well with art, right? And that's where a piece of the brand will go. It can be shortened. 24 hours of art can be cheesy, maybe in a high-end vault sense, but like 24 art, it can be shortened productively. But 24 hours of art for all reading it, we all know what we're looking at, and that was the reason. Yeah,
well, what you just said is immediately what I thought of is like, as this grows and evolves, there's totally a version of this where it's 24 hours, and then there's 24 hours of art, 24 hours of sports, 24 hours of whatever it is that you find interesting that you want to cover. I like the name.
Where did the Artifex name come from? Because I don't think we asked about that.
Artifex was this long, meandering. I've had a number of these long, meandering brand naming exercises in my life. Right, probably like one a decade, or in this case, I've had two in the span of 3 years in this space. But that was throw everything at the wall, like everything at the wall, and it's essentially a Latin term for high level craftsperson or artist or creative, and that's Artifex. So
definitely didn't know that. In my head, I was like blending art plus effects, and I heard it. I'm like, oh, that's like kind of like the blend of, and then it's like artifacts, like artifacts. Like you have this thing that is an artifact,
and that was the sort of what you hear. And at the end of the day, in that creative brainstorm, it was appreciating the natural meaning of it, the literal meaning of it, but also what you hear and what it relates to. And it's etching in digital stone, right? It's creating these objects that the goal is a level of permanence to them. And so that felt right with the naming there.
The naming exercises we had at Fractional going into Tessera, it's just like you're at the website looking at all the related words. You got this word bubble wall. You're like writing down ones, and then you're working backwards off like, is the domain name available? Can we actually get the Twitter handle? Like, did you have the same thought process with like Artifex where you're like, okay, we can get the domain, like we can get the Twitter. It's not, oh, we need to be underscore effects or something to like get the brand. So it's a lot more to it than just like, oh, we found a good name we want. It's like, oh, now it needs to check all these boxes or we can't use it as a brand.
Have you ever found a name where, and I'm trying to remember what it was, but I know we found one where it was almost sold on it. It almost felt like an aha moment. And then you go and you start looking at it and like, oh, that's trademarked and that's a thing and that's already out there. And
yeah, a couple times.
I feel like we did that with Tessera a couple of times.
Yeah, we'd thrown around like Mosaic and a few others, and all of a sudden you're like, shit, there's like a million companies that have this name actually. I've never heard of them, but they exist.
They're out there.
Yeah,
and it would be
like,
really annoying to also have that same name.
Like some of them even existed in the blockchain space.
Yeah, and I'd never heard of them, which is insane.
You
Like
would look
almost
up
impossible
like
for me.
Mosaic or one of these, and you'd be like, wait, like that's a project? And then you might go on their Twitter, and it's like they haven't tweeted for 2 years. And you're like, fuck, like I don't want to like.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden I'm like DMing one of the founders and like, hey, can I have the domain? Like, or is this discontinued? And they're not answering. You're like, all right, let's just move on to the next
They're
one.
like, no, I'm squatting on it. This is mine. This is my baby.
So one thing that happened in the early days of Artifex was RTFKT,
Yes.
Artifact
Yes.
Studios, right? They had not, to frame everybody, how they came into the space in their early days. We were all left to our own guesswork as to how it was pronounced. It looked like
I had no idea what the fuck it was.
People thought it was like "are fucked."
Right.
Like, what?
So right around our launch, when we were going to Times Square and doing the thing big, one of the founders put out the tweet, which was like, "If in case you didn't know, this is pronounced Artifact." And then from then on, so many conversations. It's like, what do you do? I'm the founder of Artifex. Artifacts? Yes, but which one are you talking about? And in fact, I've entertained a couple dialogues, several dialogues in
They think you're
where they start asking me a specific question. I'm like, oh, right. No, not there.
not the shoes.
Yeah.
That has to be a pain in the ass. I don't think you're having that though with the 24-hour of art. Like, it's very,
Thankfully, that feels
there's-
differentiated.
There's like something that just feels so good about having there be no confusion about what you're working on when someone asks you and you say it and they're like, I know exactly what you're talking about. It's like a really silly thing that I think you can't totally understand until you've been in the opposite side of it.
Totally.
But there's something that feels so like one affirming, but also just like not annoying. When someone's like, yep, I've heard of it. I know it. Cool. And there's no doubt in their mind.
Yeah.
the fractional name was like the opposite of the 24 hours of art name, where
Yeah.
it was like, oh, you do this, and it's like, no, that's fractal.art. Like, oh,
Yeah.
you do this, like, no, that's fractional dot something else.
Well, because it was fraction.art, there was fractional, there was fractionals, there's fractional app, which was a fractional mortgage and like real estate company. And yeah, it was a
It's
fucking
like
nightmare.
6 different things people thought you did,
Gets out of hand
and then they don't
quickly.
even know what you actually do. They're like, oh,
Yeah.
wait, like,
By
let
the
me-
end of the conversation, they've moved on, they forgot.
yeah. And then when we went on the other side with Tesla, it would be like, I would have to explain the name every time.
Yeah.
They'd be like, what the fuck is that? And I'm like, okay, it's like a small like tile. Like it's like a small piece of something. It's like, and then, yeah, I feel like when you have a name that's both direct and it's in its own lane, it's perfect. And it takes a little bit to do that. When you were branding the gym, I'm curious, what was the brand name of the gym or like the gym system?
It's my favorite word, relentless.
Nice.
It's literally my favorite word. But that was a word exercise, and it ended up existing at the heart of the logo. And then the logo, I sort of rough designed it and then worked with a designer and then worked with another designer years later to modify it into what it ended up becoming.
Nice. I feel like, yeah, if you're going to a gym that's called Relentless, it's like,
What has your fitness life been like after? So, like, once you closed down, it's COVID. Did you find yourself having a period of time where you were like, you know, I'm kind of burnt out on all this. Like, I'm going to take some time off from a lot of this, or have you always continued after the fact with your own like personal fitness and your wife's, I'm sure as well?
First year was probably some of the best shape of my life. I was very much out of the gym, but where we lived with this nature trail near the house, and I would walk often with my daughter who was younger then, walk down to the rec center. She'd play in the playground, and I was doing a ton of pull-ups and chin-ups, ton of push-ups, ton of core work, ton of running down that trail, keeping it very simple, and felt great, was in great shape. And then I think a year in, and I would still frame it now, I'm not all the way out of the woods, but fitness got very complicated because we started, we got into the early stages of a bear market. You reach business challenges, you keep pressing on. And I'm a very obsessive person, and you can go a little too far. I can go a little too far down that type of a road where other stuff starts to fall off. And my fitness and wellness habits definitely fell off a bit.
I had that in the start of COVID. I'm more personally like pretty only interested in like true weightlifting stuff. But like right before COVID, I was in like the best shape of my life. I was going to the gym like twice a day because I lived right across the street from an Equinox and my job was very low demand. And then once COVID happened, I was like, I bought some stuff to work out at home and I was like, this is just not the same.
Not the
Sucks.
same.
Like I do not have the stuff needed or the space in New York City to do what I need to do. And so then I like pretty quickly got into like the worst shape of my life. I feel like it was such a weird time with all of that it really ebbs and flows. And like you're saying, crypto does not help.
Does not
I
help.
feel like maybe it's just me projecting because I'm not the most healthy person, but I feel like there isn't that big of an overlap in our space between like physical health and interest in our space. And I don't want to say that like in a bad way, but I feel like our space demands so much of your time and energy that a lot of people get caught up in it and they put their health on the back burner. And I'm still not, doing what I should be doing. But I recognized, especially in the bear market, that like I needed to do more physical things just to pass time, to sleep better at night, to get time away from screens. And like I still don't do it enough, especially now that the market's starting to pick back up. I'm like back into my old habits. It gets cold out. I'm like, I have every excuse to not walk. I have every excuse to just sit in my chair for 12 hours. And it's a problem. I don't know. Like I got to get myself out.
That's something
and screen time.
Going back to not over trading, screen time, like trying to be more thoughtful, at least for me over the last like couple months of like, you know what? I can go to the gym for an hour and I'm not going to lose out on a million trades. And you know what? I probably would have fucked the
You're
trade
one
up
of the
anyway.
most efficient people I know. Like this guy is building a new product, grinding fantasy sports every day, like NBA basketball, going to the gym and taking care of himself, also actively trading the crypto market. Like I could do like 2 of those things and then wouldn't have the time for everything else, I feel like. But
I feel like I'm like decent at like stack ranking my priorities of those things, where it's like I'm obviously going to build the stuff that I'm building every day, and like going to the gym. I've made the decision in my life that
those
like,
are the 2.
that is more important to me than if I have to choose between going to the gym or doing my daily fantasy entries for the day. I'm going to go to the gym, or like if I have to choose doing that or opening up a new leverage long position on TIA or something, like I'm going to go to the gym. And so I think that's like been the thing for me. And so like I'll take weeks off at a time from trading anything in crypto and just like sitting on what I have because like I'm just too busy right now. I can't do it. And trying to be realistic about what like my limits are, because like you, I'm very obsessive as well. And so like if I'm going to do something, I want to be really doing it.
Well, you're also good too about like going out with Allie and like 5 o'clock or whatever. Like I'm going to go do this with my family and not just like be dialed in, where I'm much more like Jess and I are out or something. I'm still like,
I mean, I definitely still do. She gives me a lot of shit.
Yeah.
That's a outside of business and everything. How do you balance having a wife and a child and just any semblance of a life outside of crypto? Do you like take any intentional steps with that, or is it easier for you? What do you do?
Yeah, I've taken intentional steps at junctures, but then like, for example, when 24 Hours of Art launches, the token specifically at the end of the year, the NFTs at the end of the year, that was all in. And so we're having a holiday, but not, I'm not really having a holiday where your mind is on it all the time. But obviously you're trying to break away for a couple hours. We took 2 days to go to Cape May. And so you're trying to like watch your daughter go around a merry-go-round and spend some time with your wife while in the back of your mind, you're thinking, I have these 74 odd things to do before launch.
That's really funny. When we launched Fractional, I was in Cape May.
There we go.
that's the place to go before you launch something big.
Yeah.
It's definitely tough to prioritize. I feel like we're good at, hey, once a week, this night, we're going to do this thing. And like, that's about all I can do, where it's like, okay, this is 2 hours of, we're going to get dinner.
Yep.
I'm going to make eye contact. Cause we do this pod and then I go home and I realize like, I don't have 2 hour long conversations with my wife.
Yeah.
Or like very rarely, especially without the phone. It's like, you might
Right.
have a 2 hour long conversation, but it's like, you're both kind of
Checking in and out.
yeah. And here you have 14 conversations like this over a week, and you go back home and you're like, I need to spend that same amount of intentional energy with my wife. And then it bleeds over to your other family members. Like every time I go home for the holidays, I'm much more present because we do this pod. And it makes me realize like, I haven't asked my dad about work, family, grandparents, like his brothers and sisters, like how he feels. Like we normally just have this very surface level conversation, like, oh, the fucking Steelers. Yeah, fucking sailors. And it's like, how are you, like, as a person? Like, how is retirement like going? Like, are you on track for that type of stuff? And like having deeper, more meaningful conversations. It's something the podcast has really brought out of me that I wasn't doing at all before.
Yeah, I feel like I'm lucky too, because Allie, my wife, is also a very strongly opinionated woman who is not afraid to tell me how she feels. And she really, really values quality time. And so, like, for us in our relationship, if we want to have a healthy relationship, like, it's not an option for me to sit on my computer every day for 12 hours a day. Like, that just wouldn't work. We would be divorced. Like,
The
wouldn't
love
happen.
language test was a huge unlock for us, like realizing like neither of us really care that much about gifts. A lot of mine is like quality time or physical touch. Hers is more affirmation and quality time, but knowing like, oh, this is what I need to do to like make this work, because if this isn't working, then everything, that's like my foundation of my life. Whereas like if the relationship with my wife isn't working, then like everything on top of it is already on a shakier ground. And this space definitely pushes relationships. Like you'll really know how ride or die your spouse is when your eyes are bleeding 18 hours at the screen every day. You're kind of blowing off your family.
Yeah.
But so outside, I think we talked about it a little bit early on, but you said your wife is more just in the sidelines. Like she'll say like, oh, I like this art piece. I'll help you decide if we want to buy it. Are you picking out things and physically putting them in your house? Like, are you a big physical art collector as well? Or is most of what you've collected been digital only? And if when you are collecting it and putting up physicals, do you have like prints with frames? Do you have any digital screens in your house? Like, how does the house look? Is it a manifestation of your love of art, or is it more like a minimalistic, clean?
It's somewhere in between. Have definitely put up a number of artworks acquired in and across the space. Trying to think. I mean, they range. They range from purely physical created artwork to a hybrid to a print to metal frame. There's a number of different things in the house. The digital screens I haven't had a great experience with.
Yeah.
Had a mural that didn't work out so well. It was one of the earlier generations and just didn't end up evolving positively. And then an atomic form that I got through acquiring a defaced artwork, but the back cracked. And so it's this pain point where I have to figure out eventually what to do with.
So physically on the front looks good, but the back is...
If you just looked at it from the front, good screen. But as soon as you start to rotate around the side, it looks very janky and very jagged. So yeah, it's a bit of a pain point on that one. But that would be the screen to put up in the household and make a true feature piece.
Yeah.
Obviously, a lot of love for defaced. And no matter what Benny says, #1 defaced collection in the world rests on this couch.
Wait.
Keep going. I need to go to the bathroom.
Oh, no, you're good. I think the physical manifestation of our art collecting in our homes with our spouses is one of the more challenging things.
Oh, yeah.
For me, if I lived that house by myself, it would be very chaotic. It would be, no white space. It would be a bunch of collage / I don't know what the right word of like the layout is, but it would be very tight. The aspect ratios of everything would be very different, and it would just all be jammed because I want to show off as much as possible. And my wife is this kind of restrictive factor who is like, it needs to look aesthetic. It needs to look well thought out. It needs to look intentional. It needs to not be too busy. She has like more of a mild form of like OCD too, where if it's like the height is different and they're not centered, like it drives her crazy. So she's the one who hangs most of the art in our house. I will place it around the house in places I think it'll be good, and then she'll make the executive decision of like, it's going to go up here. And if it is going to go up here, it's going to be at this height, and it's going to be lined up with these other pieces. And it's been fun because I never saw that side of her ever until getting into the art. Like I think we bought like IKEA and TJ Maxx and like Marshall's art, like the $20 to $40 range stuff. And then that was all we had.
Yeah.
But now it's like, here's 300 pieces to choose from. Like, what do you think would look good in here?
Yeah.
And it's opened up a whole new dynamic of our relationship where like I didn't know that we could appreciate art this much. And it's been fun to see her taste evolve over time and then to work with her to, you know, display both of our tastes in our house has been a really rewarding part of our relationship that like not only when I started collecting art by myself, but like I never thought that would have been possible to unlock because we didn't go to museums together. We didn't really go to like galleries and look at art together. But once it started accumulating a bunch of it, it was like, oh, we like this. Like, she enjoys it just as much as I do, picking out something nice, getting it framed, getting it to match the environment, and then hanging it.
Yeah, framing experience is a thing, the whole thing.
Framing experience gives me so much more love for on-cyber and digital art because, like, just recently I got 9 pieces framed, and I love all of them, but one of them I should have gotten a 1/2 inch or inch matte on it. It's the 10,000 Punks, and it's kind of really busy. Like it goes to the frame, and it kind of cuts off the last like row on each of the square because I didn't get matted. And it's like, oh, if I want to get it like fixed, it's gonna be like another $150 because it's like they gotta get a new frame, a new piece of glass, and they gotta add the mat.
Yeah.
And it's like, fuck, I didn't think that through. And in the digital art realm, it's like click.
It's fixed now. Yeah.
And it's it makes me give a way more appreciation for the physical aspect. Like I didn't have that. I think I don't want to say the word care, but like I didn't have that idea when I was going through a museum of like, oh, why is this framed very ornately in like a 3-inch thick gold, you know, frame, and then why is this one just like not framed?
Yeah,
or
no
why?
frame.
Yeah, and now it's like all I think more about the frames almost than I think about the art pieces. And it's this weird thing where it was like, oh, that's one of the most important parts. And you don't think about it when you're in the digital
Yeah,
world.
it totally changes the dynamic. Like Allie and I when we were in Art Basel last year, we had just purchased a place together and we were like, too much. We don't know what the place is really going to be. We had moved in like the day before we went to Art Basel. And then we were like, when we come back this year, we'll buy some artwork to hang on the walls. And so we went and like one of the days we just kind of wandered around and we were like, all right, we're going to find something. And like, we were looking at this one that we ended up buying and they had like different frames for different ones and it like totally changed the vibe of how it looked and everything. But my style for all of those is always just say to the artist, like, what frame should I get? You tell me, because I don't know.
Is that what you ended up doing for this one?
Yeah, well, so because she was like, oh yeah, I can frame it in whatever you want, and I was like, just pick whatever you like. I don't care. Like, pick whatever you think looks good.
See, we're like, oh, well, our we have a white table, and then under the table, all the chairs are black, and we have black handles in the kitchen. So like the accents are black. We're like, okay, we get black frames in this room to make it all accent each other, and then I'm the type where it's like I want to get the same frame on everything. I want every
So it all
more
cohesive.
pragmatic. And
every piece. So, but you know, a bunch of pieces we got at our old house had different frames. So it's like, oh fuck, I don't want to get it. You know, you'll spend easily like $10,000+ on frames to put on 20+ pieces in a house, and you don't realize the cost. And then it makes it so much. You have to be so much more intentional. Like we're sitting here and we have dimensions on a grid paper, and it's like, okay, 10 blocks is 10 feet, and here's a 4-foot painting is 4 blocks, and it's like you have to think about all of that before you go pay all the money to get it framed. And we've learned the hard way with some stuff. It's just like, yeah, we should have done it differently.
Yeah, we still haven't figured that out. Actually, we bought 2 like matching pieces. They're like this from the same artist, same like series, but different. And we have like a very large wall to hang them on. But I was like, I have no idea where the fuck we're supposed to hang these. Like, do we just put them in the center? It's like, I literally think I'm going to try to find someone who does like interior design or something and be like, I'll give you some money. Just like come into our apartment and tell us where they should go, because I have no idea. It's like, I feel like that's harder for me than finding art that I like, is knowing where, like what level to hang it at and all this stuff. Because I have so little of an eye for that.
Exact inches off the ground, but like you want the center to be like eye level for the average 5'9".
So like we did that for one of the things that we got, and it's like in our bedroom, but like is, it's a humble brag. Our ceilings are too high,
Yeah.
and it looks weird because it's like not in the center, and like Ali and I are also both pretty tall, and so it just like doesn't work. And so we're gonna have to get it rehung, I think, because something about it just doesn't feel right.
Well, you have that like. I feel like you have the projector aimed at there. If you still have it, I was like, you have in your to the left of the
Yeah, that's
kitchen,
where
you
our
have the big
projector
wall.
goes. But we have the wall behind the couch that we're gonna put stuff on. But so for
Anyway.
context, we don't have a TV in our living room. We have a projector, and so we have like a wall, kind of like, it's an apartment
Big
in the
ass
city,
wall, yeah.
and so it's a wall that's also next to our kitchen because it's our apartment. But we just use a projector for that instead. It's honestly awesome.
Does it project on the pure wall?
Yeah.
Nice.
Do you ever put any like art on that projector, or is it just TV?
If we like leave it running while we have our Apple TV on, it will cycle through all of our saved photos,
Oh, that's
which
cool.
is nice. But we don't really leave it on that much because
Expensive.
one uses electricity, but two, we don't have blinds in our living room and it's too bright, and so it also has been a really nice forcing factor that we don't watch TV during the day. We basically only can watch TV when the sun has set.
That's a positive.
The winter happens. You have TV on at 5 o'clock.
Dude,
now.
literally, now that it's wintertime, we're like, we can watch TV. It's 4:30. Like on the weekends, we're like, we don't have to go out. We can just stay home and watch TV. But it's been kind of nice. We'll eventually get blinds. But blinds are expensive, man.
The big ass blinds.
So we talked to, there's like the Shade Store or whatever, and they're not quite as bad as this, but one of our friends works for Lutron, who they do like smart home stuff and all of that. And we like had them come in to look at putting blinds in our living room. And it's like 14 feet high or between 12 and 14 feet high windows, probably like 22 feet across. It's not that much. And they quoted us $50,000
Holy shit!
to put in like automatic blinds or whatever.
Worse than frames.
I
Worse
thought
than
he was going to
frames.
say like 10.
Yeah, no, because it was one of those things where I was like, I'm comfortable spending a good amount of money on this.
Yeah,
And
5
they
ETH
said like
should do it.
they sent us the email after coming in, and they're like $50,000, and I was just like, no, that's a wedding. Like, I was like, Ali, do you want to have our wedding or do you want to have blinds? And she was like, let's do the wedding. It was totally insane. But even like going to like the Shade Store or whatever, it's probably going to be 5 figures, but it'll be like $10,000, $12,000, because like we want to get ones that are automatic or that are on motors and stuff.
The home stuff is, we've slowly been furnishing our house, and we were buying a couch and a recliner, and they try to upsell you on
Always.
like if you buy a couch and recliner, they're like, well, why don't you get a coffee table and 2 end tables and a rug and a media center? And like they put this rug on there that was the same price as the couch. And I'm like,
Were you
this
at
is like
Restoration Hardware?
yeah.
Yeah, the rugs are crazy.
I'm like, this is a $12,000 rug. Like, we're sitting there at the lady. It's like they're wearing like a really nice thing. I'm wearing my Forgotten Runes thing, look like a fucking like I'm wearing like psychedelic shirt, and she's just like going through the line items. I'm like, we just want the couch and the recliner. Very respectfully, like the idea of buying this rug right now, I'm gonna throw up. Like I didn't know it was legal to sell a rug for $10,000.
You don't understand. It's imported from Africa.
Dude,
they have a
like-
man who sits there and he cuts all of it with
It's like
scissors. We had this whole same spiel, which is why I knew it was Restoration Hardware.
Oh my god, my jaw hit the ground, and I was like, Jess, like, what did you set me up for? She's like, I didn't know that it was gonna be like this. But doing the things like, we're trying to pick out something that we're gonna have for 20 years.
Yep, of course.
And it's very intentional. It's like the couch matches all of our frames in the living room. The recliner is an accent color of some of the art that's on the walls in the living room. And it also has to do with the scenery. And it's like my whole life has become way more artistic since finding this space. Like before, I would have been the person, white walls, white everything. And now when I go on a call with somebody and they have only a white background, like they don't have anything going on, I'm like, oh, I'm thankful I have this like rabbit hole of expression that I can go into that's completely different. And I'm always curious because I think like the house tells a lot, not only about you as a collector, but then your relationship of, does my wife have the same eclectic taste I do? How do we display things? And then with kid, it's like you can't have certain pieces, sculpt 3D pieces or certain things with the kid because it's like they don't know when they're a kid, they kill it. not kill it, but break
Or
it.
cats sometimes.
Well,
Cat just
yeah,
broke
pets.
a bunch
Do
of
you
our
have any
shit the other
pets?
day.
A dog, crazy dog.
How old?
Now 3 essentially. Yeah.
What kind of dog?
He is a Skipper Key Chihuahua.
Ooh.
Oh, so a little.
What is this? What is a? I obviously know what a Chihuahua is. What is a Skipper
Skipper
Key?
Key looks a little bit more wolfish.
Okay.
Its nickname is actually the Black Devil.
I'm gonna look it
That's
up.
the literal nickname for the breed.
Oh, what
And-
made you decide that this was the breed? The black.
My
dog?
wife decided.
Okay,
Yeah,
she-
that was solely her decision. Not our finest moment together as a couple.
Yeah.
I'm not perfect at all, and but this one was on her. We had a dog, also a Chihuahua.
Kind of like this.
Yep, there you go.
Here for context, these.
Looks
Yep.
cute.
That actually looks like comparatively to Chihuahuas, it looks pretty sick. Actually, that's cool.
Looks thicker.
It's definitely it's aesthetically additive to Chihuahuas.
Yeah.
But probably the opposite in terms of personality type.
Okay.
Just from a chaotic,
Yeah.
all over the place, very loud, very protective standpoint, almost impossible to walk. Like to go on an enjoyable walk
Yeah.
where you know you're going to encounter many other people, other animals, not what you
Yeah.
want to be doing. I am typically, when I take him for a walk, which I do usually most mornings and most evenings, I will be going in the opposite direction of humanity of all kinds and just find nice, easy walk, safe space, nobody around. He's great. Don't get me wrong, but no, he's a handful. And yeah, we cannot have any art or anything accessible to his height, which fortunately is very short.
Yeah.
Not a jumper with the paws going up the wall.
But he's been great because we do have an only child. He's been great with her, and that is probably the biggest positive there is, where they have a good time together.
Did your child help pick out the dog?
No,
Or
that was my wife.
Solely the wife.
Yeah,
Like 100%.
Yeah, she had
How old's your
she
child?
had a vision. She had a vision there. 3.
Nice. Also, they're the same age. That's nice.
Oh, daughter's 6, but
Okay.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
but she was at the
She was 3 when you got her.
when-
Yeah. Perfect
exactly.
Age for
She was
that.
a great age for that.
Where
I
they're-
feel
I'm
like
sure they're
that-
like best friends.
Growing up, I always wanted the dog. Like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then we finally got one when I was older. And then when I was like in college, the dog passed. And it was the toughest fucking, like, it felt like losing a brother. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, we got the dog. I wanted the dog so much. And then, like, I'm in college and then it's gone. And it's like, this is
Yeah,
the
and it
worst.
sucks too because you're away for college. Like our first family dog passed while I was away at college, and like it was one of those things where all throughout high school it slept in my bed with me, and then I'm not even home when it dies. It's like a
But
shitty
being
thing.
able to grow up with an animal is like such a special thing. I feel like you get like, and 3 is such a good age because they're not a baby. Like the baby 0 through 3 is like, I remember my little brother grabbing our cat and like he didn't know how to touch a cat and he like
Yep.
grabbed the cat by its skin and
Yep.
my brother was not even a year old. Like, but at 3, it's like they have that sense of, oh, I can, like, I don't need to grab the tail and yoink it, but I can softly pet it. Do you find that you're able to give some of the responsibilities to your daughter for the dog? And it, like, for me, it was like really good in teaching me, like, you need to take care of this thing. It's a set routine every day. And then my parents were like, you wanted the dog, like, you, when you're here, need to take care of it because you got to help out.
She's very helpful. She doesn't have she doesn't have sole possession of an entire routine element.
Yeah.
But she expresses herself within multiple routines of his, and she's very quick to get him his food, get him his water. He just had to go in for like a checkup and had some medicine on the backside, get him his medicine, do those kinds of things. She'll come with you on a walk, glad to hold the leash, those kinds of things. So we're gearing her up where she'll take possession of all dog routines eventually.
Nice.
I feel like that was something as a kid you don't respect your parents enough for. It's like they're trying to get you into do routines, and then as a kid you're like, I want to play video games.
Right.
Yeah. My routine is Call of Duty.
I get home and I want to drink Sunkissed,
Yep.
and I want to play Call of Duty for 8 hours. But looking back, it was like these little things that they did. If I didn't have those, I would be even worse than I am today. And I'm like kind of thankful they did them. But going through it, I was like, why the fuck am I waking up at 6 a.m. to let the dog out? Like, why do I gotta like go get this shit out of the yard with a shovel? I'm like, now that I'm older, I'm like, okay, I need to make my kid do that stuff.
Yeah.
It's tough. I'm excited to be a parent. So I like talking to a bunch of parents on the pod. Just trying to get there is a interesting journey that is think often overlooked. Like one thing I've learned over the last 2 years is how many friends I've had who have tried to have kids and it has taken like years.
Yeah.
Not just like, I have one friend who I always joke about. I'm like, I love you, man, but I hate you because like you tried to have a kid and it was like the first month you had a kid.
Yeah.
It's like, that is so uncommon. For you, was it a quick journey or was it like a long process of trying to have a kid? If you don't mind me asking.
In the middle, somewhere in the
middle.
middle. Yeah, it wasn't the easiest journey and wasn't the longest journey. So, but I have a lot of respect for, people fall on both sides of it.
It's like you got the whole doctor thing, you got the timing thing, and then you're like, oh, come back in 2 years. And then they're like, okay, maybe you got to get tests. Then you do tests. Like, okay, now you got to do IVF if you want to do that. And it's like, how is this not easier?
But you know what? It's part of it, right? And you're going to be a great dad too, by the way.
I can't wait, man. I can't wait. Finally, like the last year or so, like since we closed down the company, I got some more time and stuff. It's like, I'm really ready for this.
Yeah.
So I'm excited when we get there. I think it'll happen sooner or later, but just got to put the vibes out there.
Little D's is going to be fun.
Little D's.
Make it harder to trade shitcoins.
I've already had so many thoughts about like technology and raising a kid. Is that something you think about now in the age of like iPad babies?
Oh yeah. We were very protective of that becoming too much of a thing, where I think we saw some examples around us and it's like, maybe that's not how we want to roll. So I think we started very protective. Not, you can go too far in that, but now we're in this nice middle ground of, first of all, believe firmly in STEM, want her to be technologically advanced, want her to to an extent be steeped in it, but also you need to be physically fit, be in activities, be present, not be too obsessed. And so it's trying to ride that line. She definitely will request iPad time. She does want to get in there and use it. She wants to play on Roblox. She wants to explore and learn. And so it's trying to set the appropriate boundaries, usually tie it to her accomplishing what she needs to be doing outside of that. And then set her loose in there to be free and learn and grow. Yeah.
I was reading some like parenting, not article, but more of like a perspective, like a blog thing. And he was talking about how for his kid, he makes them read books for iPad time. It's like one book is 1 hour of iPad time. And it's like, oh, well, you haven't read any books this week. You can't use the iPad. I was like, it's kind of smart. But having to form a whole new incentive system, it will be very interesting because I feel like my parents, they did give me some responsibilities, but the incentives were all out of whack. And they did their best. Yeah. But like now it's exciting to be like, oh, I can do better. Yeah. And like see what happens.
And so much of it too, simple things. Like one philosophy I believe firmly in is like control your bookends. Like going back to fitness and the way I even carry myself, when I control my bookends, I'm usually in a great place. And so like right now, my front bookend, meaning when I wake up, is dominated by work. In a sense, it allows me to be very productive at what I'm doing there, but obviously the fitness has fallen off. So like the control the bookends philosophy when it applies to her is, when she's getting up or when she's going to sleep, that iPad is not part of the process. And there's no question about that. There's no like, Dad, I had the iPad last night right before bed, and why can't I have it tonight? We read a book. We read a physical book, usually together, either her reading pieces of it, I'm reading pieces of it, transitioning more of that responsibility to her. When she gets up, it's just like good, solid breakfast, getting ready for school, possibly polishing up a spelling test or practicing writing a story. But I think that helps because then kind of whatever happens in the middle of the bookends, some of that can be chaotic and some of that can be all over the place. And she can get iPad time here or there. But if you always like fall back on that bookend structure where she knows what to expect, you know what to expect, I think that's a good start.
How do you introduce art into her life? Because for me,
she loves art.
As a kid, I felt out of place. Like my parents really didn't take me to art galleries or museums. It was much more like a school field trip. Hey, we're going to this place for a couple hours. And I always felt like, not unwanted, but like out of place. How have you been like, because art is now such a big part of your life. How do you share that with her? And how do you find that she, reacts to it?
She loves it, first of all, loves it. yeah, just nothing else to say beyond that.
Like you take her to a museum and
she would be interested and curious, and I mean, certain museums she might get bored at, but like overall, she would react very positively to it. Brought her to multiple events that we've done. So back in 2021, when we did the New York Times Square takeover, she was there, and she was on my shoulders looking up at a billboard with our art all over it, and got to talk her through, hey, this is Euphoria and this is Bill Ellis, and you go through all of the artists that she was witnessing. And then further, we're developing, as part of Artifex, several of the artists have worlds, immersive worlds, right? They built in Unreal Engine, and they run real time on browser. And she's obsessed with like Brian Brinkman's world. She's a dad.
That adds up. That makes a lot of sense.
Dad, can you pull that thing up? That world, the world that I like, and then
the one that I like,
and she'll go and dive in and enjoy. We've done. We'll draw characters together. So we'll do this like Saturday exercise sometime where we'll pull out like Aku. And, hey, we're going to draw this Aku. Dad, I don't know how to do that. Sure you do. Just start somewhere, and just coaching her through those moments. Now, as it's evolved a couple years later, now she's in an art class. She's now starting to break my brain where she's doing things that you don't expect. There's little kid drawing steps that you expect. Mm-hmm. Every now and again, they'll do something that surprises you, but it's still within like a small mind that's growing. Now she's blossoming where she'll bring something home from the art class where I'm like, holy shit, that's different. I didn't expect that. How did you think to do that? That's when it gets really fun. And I feel like you go through that number of stages with a kid. First, it's like, as they're learning well, I guess first it's motion. Yeah, walking. Right? Walking, then running, and then surprising you with how they're handling that. Then it's language, starting to ask you questions and starting to express curiosity past like the most obvious levels, and then creation and art. And those are the most fun moments. So when she breaks my brain, I'm like glowing inside. So I've shared a couple of those on socials just because I'm just blown away by her progress. And it's really fun. She have like a little gallery in her room of her stuff hanging up or anything? She's got stuff all over the place now. She has stuff all over the place. She has actually an artist, Kobay, Kobay, that I found in late 2020 and became one of my favorite artists. So I have a couple of his artworks, and he and I, as well as he also knew the artist Han, found our crypto cubes. But we all talked and met a few times, and we're just conversing. He, over the course of time, asked me, "Hey, what's your daughter's favorite character?" And she was watching a lot of, what's the movie? Buster Moon. You know Buster Moon? No, I don't think so. Sing. That's the movie. Sing. It's a bunch of animals. Okay. And essentially, it's about creating a musical. And Buster Moon is like the funny, sometimes, anyway, the guy who puts on the musicals. Yes. And she picked him. And Kobay, who is a really exceptional mosaic stone creator, sent a mosaic of Buster Moon, and it's in her room. That's cool. Mixed in with her art and mixed in with a whole bunch of other stuff. But we've always had that up on the wall. I feel like as a kid, my like creative drive got squashed pretty early. Like my mom kept everything I ever made. Let me say that. Like she did keep Which everything. Is cool. Like I can go back and see like in kindergarten, like I was drawing these weird pictures of leprechauns and lions, like very, crude. You can barely tell it's alive. It's like a stick figure. For me, it was always dinosaurs. I was always drawing dinosaurs. Yeah. Do you remember those books where it would be like, draw a circle? Literally those, yeah. I would do those for dinosaurs all the time. Draw 2 circles. Yeah. Erase the circle inside the circle. Finish the dinosaur. And you're like, wait, like I just got circles. And then it's like, this is too hard. I give up. I'm going to trace Goku on tracing paper. Mm-hmm. And now I'm an expert artist. And then that was as far as I got. But in the middle of that, you mentioned Aku. We haven't talked about Aku at all. Are you still working with them? Because I know at one point, were you the head of Web3 there, or you're head of something? I might be misremembering. Yeah. But is that still on the plate of all the stuff that you're doing? So I'm an advisor to Aku. Okay. And still have a great relationship with Micah, as well as core team. Dirk at work, art director of both Aku and Artifex. Yes. So I think it's just a scale of of the brand of where it's all going. And I think in Aku's case, it's like, as a number of us are having these discussions, how do you move forward with something that's sustainable?
I feel bad. The Aku mint
I mean, that changed everything.
burn was like one of the most unfortunate things I think that happened
That was
in
brutal.
the bull, because it was like all the funding from that, just for the people who don't know, is like, I want to say like 30 some million, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, at the time,
That,
it's obviously fluctuated as ETH has fluctuated, but
locked
point is,
in.
there's a lot of
money.
locked up ETH.
And we can't get it out. It'll be there forever.
So at the time, I was advising the release. I was not head of Web3 at the time, but I was advising that release and very involved from a collector perspective. As something, I was becoming great friends with Micah, and I was very interested in the market machinations. And so I was able to give a lot of here's what we're looking at. One of my philosophies is, especially when you're pricing a large release like that, you want to do it as late in the game as possible because of how quickly things move.
Yeah, you don't want to set the price 3 months before it launches.
Yep. So a lot of that was day-to-day conversations with Micah, just sort of reflecting on what I'm seeing and what made the most sense. And I think everything was in a really good position. But I think that speaks to how treacherous the space can be, because there's a lot of, especially when you're talking about that level of a release, a lot of things, there's a lot of fields of expertise that are all meeting in the middle to lift something off. And I'll just never forget, I was going on vacation with a family, and the release was going down the day before we were leaving. And I remember the core team at the time was in, I think it was like London. So they were overseas somewhere in like a war room, locked down. And I had sort of, all the pricing was set, everything was good to go. Now I'm wearing my collector hat, thinking like, what am I going to do now? Because I have all these Akus, and then I'm paying attention, and then the first hints that something is amiss come out, and then rumors start to fly. I'm trying to both be respectful of how chaotic it must be in the war room, while also asking, what's up. And I remember it just, at one point, it was solved, and then it definitely wasn't solved, and then it sort of crashed back down. But then we traveled to Florida because we were scouting out, living down there for a little while. And we traveled down to Florida as a family. And I remember the first couple of days of that trip was just a lot about phone conversations and dealing with the aftermath. And I think Micah stepped into it as best he possibly could. And at the end of the day, all you can do is move forward.
It's one of the most unfortunate things I think that happened, because, I love Micah. I love what the vision was. And it was, like you said, a meeting of expertise is a stress we had at Fractional and Tessera with any drop too. It's like, it looks good.
A lot of things could go wrong.
It was audited, but you always have in the back of your mind, like, what if I wake up and like something got exploited, and like,
yeah. Because we've seen it happen so many times.
And you don't know until somebody breaks it.
So I don't know where our timeline is at,
Oh, yeah.
but we are getting dangerously close to 1. I don't know when.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
We've been going
Just
for almost
FYI.
3 hours. Okay. Yeah, we'll wrap up and grab some food before the next one. We have a question that we ask everybody.
Please.
And I don't know if you know this question. You might. But the question is, if you were going to write an autobiography, what would the title of it be? And part of me thinks it might be something you said earlier, but
So the title is, I believe, the title of another autobiography. The first thing that comes to mind is Relentless.
that's,
I figured that was.
I
what
don't
you
want
would
to
say.
lead it, but that's what I thought it would be.
That's why I like the word so much, is what it represents. I really feel from this era that we're all living through in Web3, crypto art, however we want to frame it, whatever you're interested in, stuff's moving so fast, and there are so many of these short-term successes and failures and everything in between. And I really feel if we broaden out, there are going to be historical examples that exit this era and define, right, the sort of the birth of all of this, the birth of the digital asset marketplace and the introduction where, artists came on chain. And like, there are going to be these examples that define the history of what we're living through. You're doing a great, like, you're recording a piece of that. I'm attempting to record.
You've recorded a bunch of pieces of that. 70.
Right. And I find that to be so fascinating. And so the philosophy that I try to adopt, and why the word means something to me, is I think it's very easy to get lost in the day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month. And it's very easy to react too hard, take something too personally, give up on something too quickly, retain something for too long. But when you broaden out that relentless, that chopping of wood and carrying of water with the right North Star over and over and over again, I feel like that ends in a great place. When you sort of walk through the pits of the bear and make it out the other side, experience the highest of the highs, make a few mistakes up there too. If you're able to get through, especially one of those, but probably two of those, it can be really game changing what waits on the other side. And so that, like, to me, relentless means staring it all in the face, doing what needs to be done day over day, and putting it in the best possible position where you know there are no guarantees, but you feel you can be additive to all of it in your own way. Let's make it out the other side.
I love that. I can vision the art piece for this episode being like a very small man at the corner of the screen looking at a, either giant mountain or giant trail that they have to go through. And like, you stare it down and you're like, okay, step by step, we're going to take it, see where we go. But Roger, this has been the longest episode I think we've done of the 5 so far.
It's unfathomable to me
how quick that went.
That it's almost 1 o'clock. Like, unfathomable.
That's why these are fun.
Yeah.
You lose time.
We've done so many in real life ones, and then when we do the virtual one, it's like 45 minutes. You're like, all right, gotta wrap this up. But in person, you're able to go so much deeper. So thank you so much. Are there any things you want to plug or shout out? This will probably air in a month or two. So if there's anything, I know we have the Mint might be not available by the time people are hearing this.
That'd be fun.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess let's frame ourselves at this little slice of time. One thing I did want to mention, I want to give a shout back to Micah and to Aku.
Yes.
To wrap up that dialogue, he was just on MLB Network on the field with the crew, talking about art, talking about Aku. And so no matter, again, it goes back to those challenges. You overcome those challenges, you scale appropriately, you do what needs to be done in that particular moment. You come out the other side into some pretty awesome opportunities. I think it sets a good example for overcoming that kind of a circumstance. Yes. Then in terms of the 24 hours of art brand, so Artifex waiting very impatiently for Apple Vision Pro.
Yes.
And really their subsequent iterations, seeing where all of that ends up. And then 24 hours of art. Yeah, we're at a really fun time right now. We're seeing things come together. 50 some odd left. Let's see by release time, where are we? Who knows? But I think by release time, what we'll start to see is multiple months come together of what this can all mean. I'm a big whole is greater than the sum of the parts. Mm-hmm. I think that applies here more than almost anything else I've ever done. And seeing these multiple months come together, both aesthetically with the designs, from the reports, the planned improvements to the reports, how that group is coming together. It's going to be fun hitting stop on this conversation today and then picking it up on release and seeing how that gap is bridged.
Yeah, getting to look back at this like kind of moment in time of how you were thinking about things and where everything was at. Yeah, that'll be cool.
I'm excited, man. Thank you for taking the time. I know you're a super busy dude. I know you put off the space today so we can have this conversation and not rush it. I appreciate you moving it and for you to spend 3 hours hanging out with us. Thank you.
A pleasure. And appreciate you both. One, putting this type of a conversation in such a comfortable mind space or head space that time can bleed off the clock and we all don't realize it together. That's special, and very few conversationalists and interviewers are able to execute that. And so I think that's a huge testament to what you guys are doing. And also just the level that you're doing it to, the I don't know, the thought process of setting up this ambiance, how you do, recording at such a high level with the equipment. It could kind of go on there, but my hats are off. I know sort of what that takes at a very deep level, and you guys are doing it really well. So thank you. Thank you.
We take a lot of pride in making sure that it is high quality in-person content because we don't want to waste your time as the guest. We want you to feel like it's time well spent. And then we don't want to waste our viewers' time, our audience's time with a conversation that is the same conversation they've heard you have on the same 45-minute-ish topic. So once again, man, thank you so much for hanging out with us and can't wait to share this with everybody.
Let's go. Thank you guys.